So I'm not gonna lie. A few days ago, I read the chapter set for part 75, which was chapters 235 to 238, and I was gonna wait. I said I couldn't wait, but I thought about it after I was editing, and it was like, I'm gonna wait and hold off, not read the next set, get some comments, talk about those things, and then it's Christmas Eve as I'm recording this, by the way. And on Christmas Eve, someone just comments on a random video. They're like, why are you yelling all the time? And you know, I shouldn't let stuff like that get to me. It's just trolls being trolls. It's just assholes who don't have reaction channels of their own, I'm sure, just leaving random comments without consequence, not realizing, and probably realizing the psychological damage it does on people when that stuff adds up. But you know what? I'm in my 30s. I've got a full-time job. I'm doing this for fucking fun. I'm fine. It's fine. So I was like, you know what? I could sit here and mope and be sad on Christmas Eve that some asshole said that, or I can indulge myself, have a piece of peanut butter fudge, and read the next set of chapters for Heaven Official's Blessing! Yeah, so screw you haters. I'm gonna go read some Don Mai, so stick it. And I'm gonna be loud and obnoxious and yell. So I hope you're ready. No, I was like, what an ass. So I thought, what can I do? Well, I can mope about it, or I can make myself happy. What's the best way to make myself happy? Well, considering we left on a really gigantic cliffhanger, and I was like really upset about that, I was like, I'm just gonna go ahead and read the next chapter set, so suck it. Yes, so you guys will get to benefit from a very sugar-filled, coffee-filled, very adrenaline-filled Romania Black who's ready to read and figure out what happens, because you cannot leave us at MXTX on that note. How dare, right? So yes, dear friends, I'm sorry you're watching this so much later than I read. I will probably take a little bit of a break after this to at least see some comments. But yes, we're going to be looking at chapters 239 to 241 of Heaven Official's Blessing. 3 chapters, pages 87 to 124 in volume 8 so far. This volume's been amazing. I didn't know what to expect from the final volume, because, you know, when you get to the final volume of a series, it's rounding out towards the end. And I've recently finished another series, and I really enjoyed the ending of that series and thought it was really good. But there's always that risk when you run into that. It's like, oh man, is the ending going to live up to the hype? Is it going to connect all the loose threads? And the nice thing that MXTX does is I think they set up everything in a way that it will get answered, but it will probably be in the aftermath of the final battle. And like I feel like MXTX stories are kind of like Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, who's a Western author. I feel like J.R.R. Tolkien, Return of the King, has a climax, a very distinct, very noticeable climax, and then the resolution and the falling action is just like, just keeps going. There's a lot of final exposition in Lord of the Rings and Return of the King, the final book of the trilogy in that series, where there's a lot of loose ends to wrap up. And Tolkien takes their very sweet time wrapping up all those loose ends, and I feel like MXTX is kind of similar to Tolkien in that respect. They don't really care that, because a lot of stories have like the climax, and then boom, resolution, the story's over. MXTX is like, nah, I can take my time. And I appreciate that about her. So yes, I have that last cliffhanger I was so mad about. I was very unhappy. I was like, how dare you end it there? I thought about it immediately. I wanted to read this next chapter set like the same night that I recorded that video. And I was like, no, you'll rush through it. You won't feel it. It'll be fine. And then tonight I was like, nah. Not only do I not want to wait any longer to find out what happens, because I need to know, but Heaven Official Blessing is a comfort Donghua, comfort Don Mai for sure, and I needed it tonight. So on this festive holiday evening, I needed Heaven Official's Blessing, and I'm hoping that the chapters that we get this evening are going to be those that are going to give us some much needed comfort, right? But I don't know, because we're facing Jun Woo / Bai Wusheng / the Prince of Wuyong, and Xilian is this close from figuring out that Hua Chong's been there for him this whole time. He is this close. I have sweat through this sweater already. It was a mistake wearing this, but it's a mistake I have to live with. So yes, I am super excited. So let me say before I start these chapters, a big thank you to the Discord, to Patreon, to YouTube, because I know that a majority of you I'd say 95% of you that get on this channel, you appreciate what I do and the passion that I have and how much I love these series. I wouldn't watch them if I didn't like them, and I feel like you all understand that passion, and you're so kind and very, very kind and considerate, and you're very humbling in how much support you all give me. So that does not go unnoticed, first and foremost. I notice it all the time. I'm very happy about it. It's just, and you all know this as well, one negative comment can override so much and put so much mental strain that it's just, it's annoying. So I appreciate all the kindness that you all give me because it's very much appreciated. So hopefully I can continue doing what I like to do and override that. So yeah. But I'm really excited to dive into this chapter set. There's no manhwa chapter, but I haven't heard anything about the manhwa. It didn't come out this weekend. So I'm like, well, what can we do, right? So we'll just have to wait on that and see. But in any case, I'm ready to get into this chapter set, y'all. I don't know how long this whole thing is going to be, but we'll just have to find right out, right? So, yes, let's go ahead and get started and just see what we get. We are going to start Heaven Official's Blessing, chapters 239 to 241, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 239, Crack the White Armor. Fantastic magic shattering the cursed shackles. What? What is this? What are we talking about? Are we talking about Yin Yu? Are we talking about Mu Qing? Are we talking about Xu Lian? Are we talking about all the above? This may have been a very good decision. May have been, maybe. The sword Fang Xin was emitting a forceful aura, and those watching from afar could already feel themselves shudder just from looking at it. Never mind Xu Lian, who had been forced to back away step by such attacks. Earlier, Hua Chong could take on White No-Face by himself, and it was more than enough. But after Jun Wu had emerged, both of them were needed in order to make the match even. The advantage of Mount Tonglu being his main spiritual domain was gradually becoming obvious, and Xu Lian could subtly sense a heavy force oppressing and restricting their side. And Jun Wu also had white armor protecting his body, a 1,000-year-old spiritual device. Oh! That he had forged personally. Its defense practically impenetrable. He only needed to protect his head. Oh, so the armor is a spiritual device, like the Brocade Immortal. Interesting. Hua Chong's saber was incredibly fast and precise. Xu Lian also struck wherever he could, and the two practically struck blows all over Jun Wu's front, from his neck, his heart, his back, his abdomen, his shoulders, but the opponent was not affected in the least. Mu Qing shouted, "Stop wasting your strength. It's pointless. That white armor can't be penetrated at all. Aim for just under his right ribs," Xu Lian exclaimed. Oh! Xu Lian ain't giving up. No. The scimitar was unleashed again and cut where Xu Lian had instructed. But as expected, it was useless. Mu Qing shouted, "I told you it's pointless. Why don't you think of a way to pull away first, and we'll join in the fight? Feng Xin, where's your bow and arrows?" Feng Xin was just climbing the rocks on the side, ready to capture that fetus spirit that was currently crazily spitting and slithering its tongue at him. When he heard the call, he answered, "All right, I'm coming!" However, Xu Lian instructed, "Continue. Don't stop. Attack just below the right ribs." "Your Highness," Feng Xin shouted. "That armor is powerful. It might not crack even after hundreds of blows from the saber." Xu Lian was adamant. "Don't worry, just listen to me. There's no need for that many blows." Hua Chong didn't question why either, and continued attacking non-stop with the saber. Suddenly, where the blade slashed, a crack appeared. Blood spurted out. Ming's blade had cut into Jun Wu's abdomen, just below his right ribs. Hua Chong was standing in front of Jun Wu, gripping the saber single-handedly, his gaze cold and sharp as he stared him in the eyes. Meanwhile, Xu Lian stood on Jun Wu's side, and Ruyi used this chance to whip out, binding Jun Wu's hands, preventing him from moving onto the block. On the side, Mu Qing was shocked. How is that possible? That 1,000-year-old white armor, how could it be so easily cut through by Hua Chong? Xu Lian yanked Ruyi back, tight-eyeing Jun Wu. "Have you forgotten? 800 years ago, you and I fought once." Then it dawned on Feng Xin and Mu Qing, the second ascension. At the time, Xu Lian requested for Jun Wu to banish him once more and to compete for measure for a round. Although in that battle it was promised that neither party would show mercy, thinking on it now, Jun Wu must have still held himself back. But Xu Lian himself used everything he had. He unleashed over 3,000 swords. Why didn't we get to see Highness! What? Among them, over 400 managed to stab Junwoo. And in those 400-some swords, more than 100 had pierced this place. HUALIAN had relentlessly shot over 3,000 swords to attack Junwoo, and finally broke through an impenetrable 1,000-year-old white armor and pierced right into his abdomen below the right ribs. And it was the very place Hwa-Chong's saber had cut at that moment. What? So, 800 years ago, HUALIAN had already left an old scar upon the white armor. It'd only take 3 slashes from the saber for Hwa-Chong to crack it. Hwa-Chong's saber was also much sharper than HUALIAN had imagined. The scimitar rammed through the abdomen, a blow that was definitely critical. He only just sighed a breath in relief mentally when he heard the Goshi yell, "That's no use! He!" Logically, having suffered grave injuries, Junwoo's actions should have been restrained. But he only lowered his head to give the wound a glance, his expression unchanging. Right as HUALIAN sensed something was off, Junwoo's hands moved slightly. Immediately, HUALIAN heard the light sound of something tearing, and at the same time his hold loosened. Ruyi was ripped. No! The white silk band had been torn into 2 and suddenly dropped to the ground lifelessly. The next second, HUALIAN felt his neck being choked, and his entire person was pulled up. He heard Hwa-Chong exclaim, "Your Highness!" But that voice suddenly became distant. Junwoo's voice, however, was still only inches away, and he spoke. "Shanla, did you actually believe that something like being pierced by the sword that is something I have less experience in than you? Do you think I would care?" Goshi said from the distance, "Even if you all pierce him with 100 blades, hundreds of times, it'd still be of no use because he seems unable to feel pain at all anymore." HUALIAN could take a long sword penetrating his heart without flinching, and Junwoo was also the same. Feng Shen had already pulled his bow and was aiming at Junwoo, but when he heard the Goshi, he dropped it again. "What? Then doesn't that mean even if we manage to make a hit, it's still pointless?" Muqing spoke up. "Well, I might as well tell you all more bad news I've observed. I suspect his recovery speed is faster than the speed at which he's receiving blows." "What?" On the other side, HUALIAN could also verify this was indeed fact. His wound had been so terrifying. If this was anyone else, then it would have had their waist completely slashed through, and yet the wound had already stopped bleeding. "There's no need to be surprised," Junwoo said. "If you are constantly stabbed in the back, if you don't make yourself recover immediately, then wouldn't you have died 1,000 times over already? But the 2 of you are certainly quite something." He smiled. "In these 800 years, I've only been wounded by 1 sword and 1 saber, and it was from the 2 of you. Crimson Rain sought flower, stand further away. You wouldn't want me to see. You wouldn't want to see me wring Shanla's neck." Hwa-Chong's face was dark, and the sharpness in his eyes tempesting. But when he saw Junwoo holding HUALIAN, hanging him over the heaven-crossing bridge, it was clear that he would only need to release his grip and HUALIAN would plummet into the lava pool hundreds of yards below. A moment later, he reluctantly withdrew his saber, rested a hand behind his back, and slowly backed away a few steps. He appeared rather calm, but the scimitar under his arm was giving him away. Ming was greatly agitated, its eyeballs spinning like crazy, staring madly at HUALIAN. Hwa-Chong had backed away to the edge of the heaven-crossing bridge before Junwoo was satisfied. That's good enough. With HUALIAN in his hold, the 2 looked each other in the eyes. Then a moment later, Junwoo suddenly slammed HUALIAN into the wall of rocks nearby. The smashing was too violent. HUALIAN's entire head was ringing, blood running from his nose and lips in a mess, flowing down the contours of his face. In the distance, there seemed to be many people yelling in alarm, but he couldn't identify who all they were, and could only hear Junwoo speak softly in his ear. "Shanla, does it hurt when your head is smashed against the wall?" HUALIAN couldn't quite process the question, so he didn't respond. Thus, Junwoo gripped him and slammed him into the rocks again before questioning him again. "Does it hurt? Does it hurt? Does it hurt?" With each question, he'd slam HUALIAN into the rocky wall. So hard, HUALIAN started screaming. But what he was screaming was, "So long, don't come over. I'm fine. You must absolutely not come over." At least not right now. The opportune moment hadn't yet come. By the first slam, Hwa-Chong was already ready to charge over, but he hadn't taken 2 steps before he heard HUALIAN yelling him not to go over, so he forced himself to stop. But his face had turned completely savage, and the veins on the back of his hands also looked like they were going to burst. Both of his entire arms were shaking. Junwoo was expressionless, but his hand was ramming HUALIAN into the rocks like crazy, asking him repeatedly, "Does it hurt? Does it hurt?" Goshi explained, "Your Highness!" But who knows who he was calling for. HUALIAN's bloody hands pushed against the uneven surface of the rocky wall, gritting his teeth as he roared, "It hurts!" Only then did Junwoo smile with satisfaction and spared HUALIAN's poor head, putting him on the ground. HUALIAN was still hugging that ringing head of his, sitting on the ground, tears and blood flowing uncontrollably down his face. Junwoo crouched down next to him. He stared at his face for a while, and then suddenly raised his hands and petted HUALIAN's head, before gently helping him wipe away the blood on his face. This gesture was warm and affectionately kind, like a father crouching next to the child who he had just beaten black and blue, comforting him. The picture was raising hairs on both Fengchen and Muqing's necks. Has he really gone mad? The fingers of the hand Huachong rested on the saber were cracking, and the pupils of Ming's eyeball was rapidly shrinking, as if it was going bloodshot. HUALIAN didn't breathe a word, letting Junwoo help him wipe him clean. Junwoo muttered to himself, "Oh, you foolish child. If this hurts, why don't you turn back? Did you think that if you keep slamming, keep smashing, the wall will fall down on its own? Why don't you change your own course of direction?" "I won't turn back," HUALIAN stated. Junwoo raised his hand and smacked extremely violently, so hard HUALIAN fell to the ground with a loud thud. HUALIAN was still dizzy when Junwoo picked him up. Using a voice like he was almost losing his patience, he said, "Must you anger me like this? Let me ask you again, will you change?" HUALIAN coughed twice, spitting out a mouthful of blood. "I won't." A crack finally appeared on Junwoo's gentle expression. A flash of savageness flickered. The Goshi's face was turning green, and seeing the situation going downhill, he hastily shouted, "Oh, Your Highness, you never wanted to kill this child. You really like him. You said so yourself. Haven't you forgotten?" Junwoo sneered. "If that wasn't the case, then I would have exhausted all my patience and tolerance on him alone in the past 800 years. He would have long since become part of the Heavenly Capital's foundation, trampled by millions." He turned to HUALIAN, suddenly outraged. "But he doesn't know what's good for him. Stubborn, capricious, disobeying my every word. He just had to go against me. You won't change, will you? Very well. Then why don't we see if this wall will fall, if your head is cracked open?" The Goshi saw him lifting HUALIAN again and quickly yelled, "Oh, Your Highness, Your Highness, Your Highness! Little Highness is still immature. Just let him go this time. Let it go. He'll understand one day." Junwoo glanced at him and his chuckle grew colder. "Do you think I've really gone mad? Don't lie to me. The one you truly think is immature isn't him, but me, no?" The Goshi was taken aback, and Junwoo added, "You've spent so much of yourself in nurturing him, teaching and guiding him, purely because you had hoped he could win against me. So you could prove that I was wrong and you were right, and that you were all in the right. So you can hold the illusion of a perfect crown prince of Wuyong to face and dismiss the Junwoo now. Isn't that your objective? Did you think I don't know what you're thinking? That's not it," Goshi cried. "Stop getting tied up in right and wrong, victories and defeat. I've never thought that way before." But Junwoo had stopped listening, and he raised his voice, his tone sharp. "Forget it! Let me tell you right now, you can all forget it. No one can win against me, especially him." He laughed maniacally, and then dragged HUALIAN and slammed him towards the rock, smashing as he yelled, "Will you change? Will you change? Will you change?" It was as if HUALIAN had gone mad too, and he gripped Junwoo's arms, roaring, "I won't! I won't! I won't change!" Even though the smashing was making him see stars, incomparably painful, he held his breath and stubbornly, refusing to give the desired answer at all, and cried out as he roared, "I just won't change! Even if it's painful, I won't! Even if I die, I won't change! I will never change!" Now it wasn't Junwoo who was driving him mad. It was him driving Junwoo mad. Both of Junwoo's eyes were red, and just as he was about to strike another blow to discipline him, his action suddenly came to a halt. He looked down and saw a long saber was struck into his shoulder, and 8 long arrows made of sticks were neatly pinned on his back. None of that mattered, since the long saber and the arrows didn't penetrate the white armor. However, his right hand was gone! The hand grabbing HUALIAN was gone. All of it vanished from his wrist, the cut neat and clean, and HUALIAN was also gone. When he turned his head, something with a sharp, forceful wind was coming right at him. He swung his left hand and caught it, and only noticed when he saw that it was his own right hand. Across the heaven-crossing bridge, Huachong held Shilian, who was completely covered in blood. A hand was gripping the scimitar in a reverse hold, hugging Shilian's shoulders. The other hand was covering the wounds on his head. He said chillingly, "Take back that filthy hand of yours." Shilian was too stubborn and refused defeat, finally enraging Junwoo and made him expose weak points. Junwoo clutched the right hand and tacked it onto his wrist anew, twisting it a couple times to work it out, and then he pulled out the arrows on his back. Suddenly, like he remembered something, he turned his head back and looked at the pale-faced Mu Qing, who was gripping the long saber. Having their eyes meet, Mu Qing was slightly startled, but he still bold-headedly forced himself to remain calm. But it wasn't long before he could no longer keep calm. Junwoo glanced at his shoulder and commented lightly, "I knew it. Compared to Shanla, you're still lacking." Hearing this, Mu Qing's face changed slightly, but the long saber in his hand suddenly dropped, and soon afterwards his face changed colors completely. He pulled his sleeve up to look at the wrist, but he saw the black cursed shackle had suddenly tightened, the veins and nerves around it bulging around it as if endless blood was gathering towards it. Fengshen saw Mu Qing was petrified and unmoving and shouted, "What are you doing just standing there? Run!" The Goshi berated, "Fengshen, you little idiot, how can he run with those injuries on his legs?" Fengshen was shocked. "Well, fuck, I completely forgot about that!" If this was the past, Mu Qing would more than likely roll his eyes all the way back in anger. But now, even if he ran, it'd be pointless. With the cursed shackle on his hand, it wouldn't matter where he ran off to. Fengshen swore and was just about to go up when unexpectedly, after Junwoo had pulled out the arrows on his back, he flipped his hand and threw them towards him. Fengshen felt his chest go cold, and when he looked down, the 8 arrows had all returned, neatly and orderly piercing his chest. Oh my god! Junwoo walked languidly towards Huachong and Shilian. Huachong didn't look at him at all, hugging Shilian. "Gege, Gege." Shilian had suffered severe blows earlier, and it took a while before he blearily came to, his head still throbbing. But before his eyes even blinked open, he muttered, "Sun Long, are you all right?" Huachong gazed at him for a moment, and suddenly pressed him hard into his arms, replying softly, "I'm completely fine. Why don't you take a look at yourself?" Shilian clung onto his embrace, and while the hug was very tight, none of his wounds were pressured. He opened his eyes strenuously, and all the disorder around fell into his vision. Mu Qing was frozen on the spot, a hand tightly clutching the other wrist, seeming to be fighting for control with that blood-sucking cursed shackle. But by now, how pale his face looked, he might not hang on for much longer. Fengshen, on the other hand, while he wasn't pierced through by those 8 arrows, nevertheless the wounds were significant, and he was slumped over the bridge. The fetus spirit was howling demonically in high spirits, jumping up and down around him, then used its back foot to madly step on Fengshen's face. Fengshen was outraged, but he still couldn't move, otherwise his injuries would worsen. Oh my god, what a sight! Meanwhile, the entire heaven-crossing bridge was caving in, stretch by stretch, block by block, and they might collapse down with it at any moment. Shilian took all of this in and jolted, wanting to get up, but Huachong assisted him, and the two rose to their feet, their eyes moving forward together. The figure of Junwoo, who was languidly walking towards them, appeared particularly giant from the firelight all around, dropping an immense shadow. Shilian wiped hard at the blood around his eyes, nose, and mouth, staring a deadly gaze at that figure. Junwoo was holding Zushin at a slant. The sword body of Zushin was charged with incessantly flowing spiritual powers. At this moment, he was so calm and at ease that he was practically a different person than the Junwoo who was maniacally ramming Shilian onto the rocks. "Shanla, you know very well there is no doubt of your defeat." Junwoo understood Shilian too well. He knew exactly how he would fight, and his spiritual powers also overwhelmingly overtook him. Moreover, even if they hadn't exchanged blows, Shilian could still sense that Junwoo's battle aura and spiritual powers were even stronger now. With Mount Tonglu as his territory, the restrictions on their side were growing more obvious. Shilian thought inwardly, what he said was probably true. He couldn't win. But even if he couldn't win, he had to fight. However, Huachong suddenly spoke, "No, Your Highness. You can win." Shilian was taken aback and looked at him. Huachong was also gazing at him. "You can win. You're stronger than him." His one eye was bright, as if something was burning, and he said with certainty, "Believe me, he's wrong. You're in the right. You're stronger than him. You're much more powerful than him." Junwoo let out a deep and quiet chuckle, probably because he thought Hua-Chang's words were naive and amusing, or perhaps he was pleased by the domineering power in his hands. The power of millions of believers was all in his hands alone. But one person. But Hua-Chang gripped his shoulder. So what? They're millions of fools. They're all useless trash. But for you, one person is enough. Oh my God! One person was enough. Oh, Wu Ming! Shilian hadn't yet wrapped his head around it before Hua-Chang pulled him in close. And Shilian's eyes widened. Spiritual powers exploded and rushed in. This time, it was more indomitable than any other time that they had transferred spiritual powers. Even the wraith butterflies and the multi-residual spirits seemed to have felt this horrifying energy, exploding one after the other all around them, exploding and shrieking. Shilian's fingers were going to go numb, but his legs were also shaking, so much he was going to fall to his knees, and he kept on crying, stop, in his mind, but no more. But Hua-Chang's hand was firmly locked on his head, not letting him leave, refusing his refusal. Who knows how much time passed when suddenly Shilian's throat relaxed, and at the same time, Hua-Chang finally released him. Shilian's knees buckled, falling to the ground, his hands strenuously supporting himself off the ground so he wouldn't fall over completely. Junwoo stopped in his step and looked over, his face solemn. Feng Xin, who was lying in the distance, uttered in disbelief, Your Highness, your. Reaching out with trembling hands. Shilian felt his own neck. There was nothing. Hua-Chang had poured too much spiritual power into him. There really was too much, so much that it was completely outside the amount the cursed shackle could withstand. Those 2 bands of fetters that had constrained him for 800 years had burst and shattered! Oh my God! Yes! Oh! Yes! Okay! Oh my God! Chapter 240! Humming smile as red robes fade. What? Red robes fade? What? No. Mooching muttered, how is this possible? How can there be so much? That anyone could burst and shatter cursed shackles with spiritual power alone was entirely unheard of. Hua-Chang pulled up Shilian, who was slumped on the ground. Gege, try fighting again. At the same time, Junwoo came lunging, wielding the sword, and Shilian unconsciously raised his hand to slap it away, and clung! Zushin was almost sent flying. This strike was completely different than before. Shilian looked at his own hands, feeling a little dazed. It had been hundreds of years since he had felt this feeling. He'd almost forgotten that this was him. Indomitable to the point that he couldn't control his own powers. Each step would shake the mountains. 1 step to go 1,000 miles. 1 step to ascend to the heavens. He clenched his hand and violently punched at Junwoo's face. Ever since the battle begun, Junwoo's face had always remained untouched. This punch landed, and finally, a drop of blood flowed from the corner of his lips. He thumbed it away and glanced at this bit of blood. The next second, he tossed his hand and threw Zushin aside. It seemed he was going to fight Shilian with his bare fists. Shilian threw another fist, but Junwoo caught his punch, twisting it around. Intense agony spread, and Shilian's arm broke with a crack. However, he instantly righted it against himself and set out another blow, but again it was seized by Junwoo. Shilian saw things weren't going well and thought to snatch the Feng Xin that had been tossed away. Naturally, Junwoo also thought he'd take this step and blocked his way. However, he'd forgotten there were still Feng Xin and Mu Qing behind him. Although the 2 were half crippled, they both planned to sneak around and pull out the sword Feng Xin. Their actions were already exceedingly light, yet it was as if Junwoo had grown eyes on his back, and he moved his hand back and blasted. The bridge under their feet instantly cracked and both fell, plunging down to the lava stream. In the last second, a hand caught Feng Xin's boot, and Feng Xin caught Mu Qing's boot. And when they looked up, he cried, "Oh, well, what the actual fuck? What the actual fuck? Goshi, old sir, please don't ever let it go, all right?" The one who caught him was indeed Goshi. The veins were violently popping on his forehead. "So you do know I'm a senior? Well, hurry up and climb up then! I'll make the senior citizen do this all himself." Well, that part of the bridge was broken by Junwoo. Shilian raised a hand to latch onto it, forcefully keeping it suspended in midair. He'd wanted to pull it up further upwards, but Junwoo wouldn't give him that space. The 3 were a mere 20-30 feet away from the rolling lava. Even flesh ears could hear the bubbling sound of the air bubbles tumbling. Muqing was hanging at the very bottom, and it had to be in a position where his head was facing downward, his feet up, rather terrifying, and if they weren't careful, the lava was going to wash his head. The stream was boiling, his face red hot like coal, and Muqing cried, "Quick, pull me up!" Yet unexpectedly, the two above didn't yank twice before he shouted, "Wait, don't pull me up!" Goshi was exasperated. "What do you want?" Fengshen yelled, "Are you for real? Fine, I'm letting go." Muqing cursed, "Well, what the fuck? Fucking let go for real, I dare you! Look down, look at the sword!" The other two looked to where he was pointing and saw right below them there was a black, jaded long sword that was sticking in the heart of the lava stream, slowly sinking. It was the Fengshen they were going to steal earlier, before being shaken off of the bridge by Junwu. Muqing reached out and tried to crazily swing his arms at the sword, like he desperately wished that he was a gibbon, but he couldn't reach it no matter what. "Lower me down a bit more, and I can get it." The veins on Goshi's forehead were throbbing even harder now. "You two young men, don't overdo it. I'm only a sack of old bones!" "Make up your mind, Goshi." He said this as he dipped the boot in his hand, and Muqing's face came close to the surface of the lava stream by another notch. His hair slipped down and the tips of the strands caught on fire. Fengshen exclaimed, "Oh, fucking hell, your hair caught on fire. It's all gonna burn." Thankfully, Muqing had also finally pulled out the sword. As he slapped away the small flames on his hair, he threw his arm, sending the sword flying with splashes of lava towards Xilian. "Xilian, catch!" Xilian swung his arm up and caught the hilt of Fengshen. As for Goshi, he was at his limit. "I can't do this anymore. Both of you come up now!" Fengshen saw that the Goshi was shuddering and realizing things were going bad. So he yanked Muqing up and threw himself forcefully. "Enough with all your yammering and moseying!" To be thrown like this, Muqing was about to throw a major fit when just below in the lava pool, some dozens of molten resentful spirits suddenly came leaping up. Those resentful spirits were like fish jumping out of water. They leapt up, catching on hold of Fengshen's chest. If it wasn't for the spiritual light shielding his body, Fengshen would probably have been burnt through. They were scared away by Fengshen's arrows earlier, and a grudge was buried in their hearts. Oh! They sneakily dived and hid within the lava, following them all the way here, and now they captured the chance to drag him down. Without warning, Goshi was also dragged forward by this sudden increase in weight, slipping downwards. This time, it was Muqing's turn to be at the very top, and he caught Goshi by his boots. Fengshen was already injured, and there were even several arrows on his person he forgot to pull out. He fought with those resentful spirits with bare fists, but at the same time, he was mindful that the people above might lose their grips if he fought too hard, so it was a very passive bout. More and more molten, resentful spirits were gathering down below, layering one after the other as they clung on to him, like they're having a tug of war against the Goshi and Muqing. The strength of both sides were significant, and if this continued, Fengshen would be split in two for sure. Fengshen roared, "Can we just get this over and done with?" And Muqing yelled back, "Shut up!" Suddenly, he felt the weight in his hands lighten. It appeared those resentful spirits had finally let go, so he quickly pulled the other two up. Once they were up and safe, Fengshen panted harshly, still visibly shaken. Shrieking and roaring of the resentful spirits came from down below, and the group looked down. Muqing and Goshi said simultaneously, "Fengshen, it's your son!" Sure enough, among the red-hot, molten, resentful spirits, there was a blanched creature hopping around, crazily tearing at them with his teeth. Those molten, resentful spirits were all aged ghosts of at least 2,000 years, plus they'd been banded into groups, so why would they be afraid of some little minion? They couldn't even be considered a baby. Scratching and biting, the fetus spirit's body used to be chillingly white, but now it was burnt and bloody all over, crimson red covering it from head to toe. It was howling in a ghastly voice, not a single bit pitiful, and it only made one feel horror. Fengshen, however, exploded. He roared in outrage. "How fucking shameless, a group of adults bullying a child! So, come over here!" That fetus spirit couldn't defeat so many resentful spirits, and fear had already sprouted in its heart. Hearing that someone was going to stand up for it, it let out a strange cry and jumped onto Fengshen's shoulder. Fengshen took out his longbow and yanked the arrows from his own chest, shooting them out round after round, sending the lava stream turning and rolling in explosions. The fetus spirit, on the other hand, was hopping and screeching on his shoulder like it was gloating and cheering. On the other side, Xilian saw they'd escaped danger and finally relaxed. Just as he was about to focus on fighting Junwu again, he felt his chest tighten. Junwu had seized him in a lockhold from behind. "Haven't I said before? Where do you think you learned all your skills? I know everything about your moves." With this lockhold, If HUALIAN couldn't struggle out of it, then he was going to be trapped dead. But any moves he could think of to break free, Junwoo must be able to think of them too. Just then, he heard Hua Chong call out, "Gege, don't be afraid! You must know moves he doesn't! A move only you can use, that he can't!" Suddenly, a light turned on in HUALIAN's mind. Did he have one? Yes. If he couldn't break free, then he wouldn't. He turned around in Junwoo's hold facing the enemy, and reverse locked Junwoo in his hold. He enunciated each word. "I bet you don't know this move." With Junwoo in his grip, he carried both their bodies and forcefully slammed into the incomparably solid rock wall. He used all of his power in this smash, and in the rumbling of crashing of rocks, he also heard the sound of something breaking. The sound came from Junwoo. His white armor had completely shattered. Right at the same time, Junwoo released him and roared in outrage, "Get lost! Get lost, all of you!" HUALIAN looked up and a chill went down his spine. What entered his vision, what made Junwoo go mad, were faces. Those 3 faces had come out again. HUALIAN raised his sword once more and pierced through Junwoo's heart, nailing him to the rock wall. Blood spurted from Junwoo's mouth. HUALIAN had injected as much spiritual power as he could muster into this strike, and the instant Junwoo was pierced, spiritual power exploded. No matter how strong one's ability was to heal, it'd be impossible to recover from this blow. The mountain collapsed. Junwoo was nailed to hang upon the rocky wall at first, but once the rocky mountain collapsed, he was now lying on the ground. Yet he still hadn't given up. He turned his hand and gripped the hilt of Fang Shin, seeming to want to write words upon the blade. It was naturally a spell that must be stopped. However, just as HUALIAN was raising his hand, Goshi rushed over. "Your Highness, let it go! Let it go!" HUALIAN stopped, not knowing which one he was calling for, or who he was asking to let it go. Junwoo coughed out another mouthful of blood, raging, "Get away from me!" Goshi knelt next to his side and said, "Your Highness, let it go, really. Let it go. There's no meaning in continuing this fight." "What do you understand? Scram!" Junwoo yelled. "You're right, I don't understand," Goshi said. "It's been so many years. You've been a god and you've been a ghost king. All that should be killed are dead, and all you've wanted is in your hands. So why are you doing this to yourself? What exactly do you want? What do you want to prove?" Hearing this, a flash of confusion appeared on Junwoo's face. But he wasn't in a daze for long before he violently choked Goshi's neck, yelling, "Stop trying to lecture me! You have no right to lecture me! No one has the right!" The current Junwoo didn't have sufficient power, so the stranglehold wasn't hard to break free from. HUALIAN was about to save Goshi when instead, the Goshi waved his hand, signaling for him not to move. He continued, "My dear Highness." Junwoo glared at him coldly, but his hand didn't loosen. Even if he didn't have sufficient power right now, wringing Goshi's neck was still an easy task, very dangerous. However, the Goshi just let him choke away like this and said, "My teaching, His Royal Highness, was never intended to nurture a version of you who had never walked the wrong path, then use him to humiliate you. He is his own person. You are you. You are different people all along, with different paths, and that's the most natural thing. I've said this before in the past, but you wouldn't believe me. How about now?" Junwoo stared at him, not speaking a word. "I genuinely really miss your Highness," Goshi said. "I miss the once kingdom of Wuyang. I miss our people. And I miss the days before we ascended. That's all." Goshi then added, "It's been so many years, your Highness. Just watching you makes me very tired. Very tired. How about you? Are you not exhausted?" As the #1 martial god of the 3 realms, Junwoo's appearance and demeanor had always been perfect, untainted by filth. Yet now, only with all the light faded did HUALIAN notice that even with the 3 faces gone, Junwoo's complexion was overly pale. His contours were much too cold and hard, dark circles shaded below his eyes, looking inexplicably gloomy. There was none of the gentle kindness he emanated when light was illuminating his form. But the him of now, He finally looked alive, even if he appeared sickly. Goshi said gently, "Your Highness, you've lost. Now free yourself." "Have I been defeated?" Junwoo sounded a little lost. The overly powerful wave of spiritual powers broke through the dome of the rocky cave, and faint rays of sunshine came scattering from above. There even seemed to be small wisps of rain drifting down in the air. Junwoo lay sprawled on the ground while Shilian stood watching him from above, and he actually noticed a trace of relief on Junwoo's face, as if a heavy burden was let go. He couldn't help but wonder, perhaps, to be defeated by someone, to end those relentless days of brokenness and madness, was possibly Junwoo's wish deep down. A moment later, Junwoo suddenly asked, "That move, what is it called?" Shilian raised his sleeve and wiped away the blood on the side of his face. "Shattering boulders on the chest." Junwoo was taken aback. Then, as he thought of something, he snickered and sighed, closing his eyes. Beautiful. He didn't utter another word, but everyone could tell an inconceivable fatigue had overtaken him. Shilian finally moved his hand from the hilt of Feng Shen. Now he had no idea what to do at all for the next step, so he unconsciously looked over at Hua Chong. Hua Chong was still standing at the same spot, that only stretch of heaven-crossing bridge that hadn't yet collapsed, and he was already quietly waiting for him, with his arms crossed for a long time. Seeing Shilian had turned his head back, he met his eyes and smiled. The Goshi sat unmoving next to Junwoo and said, "Your Highness, you should all go now." He didn't intend to get up at all, and Shilian asked, "Master, are you not coming?" Goshi shook his head. "I'll keep His Highness company. After all, in the past, I didn't stay by his side." The rain was coming down harder, scouring Junwoo's resting face, washing away the blood flowing from his wounds. As the rain washed him, Shilian felt the 3 human faces on his face seemed to have faded somewhat. Maybe it was his imagination. After a moment of silence, Shilian took off the bamboo hat carried on his back and took it in his hand and covered it over Junwoo's face. The curse shackle on Muqing's wrist had broken on its own, and he fly-kicked that thing into the lava before that cool and calm demeanor returned with difficulty. The fetus spirit on Feng Shen's shoulder, however, jumped down, and using all 4 limbs, it crawled to Junwoo's face, carefully touching it, its attitude completely different than when it was stomping on Feng Shen's face. Feng Shen was stomping his feet in anger at the sight. Shilian, however, didn't care for anything else. He dashed straight for Hua Chong with his battered face, like he'd been reborn. In truth, it certainly was a close escape from death, and he pounced at him so long. Hua Chong had only just reached a hand out to Shilian before he was immediately pushed back a step by his tackle. He closed his arms around him and smiled happily. "Gege, you see, I already told you you'd win for sure, didn't I?" Then he lifted Shilian's face and looked over it carefully before sighing. "You've made yourself like this again." Where his fingers caressed, a tiny silver butterfly fluttered by, and the cuts faded. Shilian also smiled happily in response. "I won't next time." Hua Chong arched his brows, pretending to be cold and harsh. "There is no next time." After a pause, Shilian withdrew a smile and questioned seriously, "So long before, in Mount Tonglu, I did say that after we got out there was something I wanted to tell you. Do you still remember?" Hua Chong smiled. "Of course I remember. I remember everything Gege tells me." Shilian hung his head, and it was a moment before he finally gathered his courage and spoke with honesty. "Earlier, Junwoo divulged some bits and pieces, and they're related to this. To be honest, I should have told you this a long time ago. I just never could resolve myself to because I was afraid you'd find out." Hua Chong continued for him. "Afraid that I'd find out Your Highness almost became the White No-Face, the White Cloth Calamity, right?" Shilian was bewildered. "You?" Hua Chong didn't answer him directly. He only bent one knee to the ground before him, raising his head to gaze at him, smiling hummingly. "How's this? Gege, with this, do you remember now?" "It's like a freaking marriage proposal! No, what? How could he not?" At the time, that nameless ghost had frequently bent down to one knee to the ground in front of him like this. That pale smiling mask overlapped Hua Chong's current smiling face. Shi Lian's heart shook, his knees buckled, and he slumped to the ground in front of him, mumbling, "So long, it was you!" Hua Chong let out a small laugh and maintained that posture of one knee to the ground, and that remaining eye gazed at him deeply. "Your Highness, I've always watched you." Shi Lian could only utter one word, You! He finally understood what all those seemingly unintentional words from Hua Chong had meant. So that was it. He had never imagined that Wu Ming was Hua Chong. Oh, he had known everything. He had seen everything. He'd been there all along. All of a sudden, thousands of emotions, millions of words swarmed to his head. There was gratefulness, there was shame, there was heartache, there was wild joy, but above all else, there was incurable love. Shi Lian's heart was so full it was going to burst, but not a single word to express himself could be squeezed out. Finally, he could only tackle him forcefully, crying, "San Long!" It was as if all that he knew to say anymore. And he cried again, "San Long!" Hua Chong fell over from the tackle and sat with him on the ground, embracing him, laughing heartily. All the fears and worries from before were all swept away. Shi Lian circled his arms around Hua Chong's neck tightly, laughing and laughing, feeling like he was going to cry. But before tears had fallen, he abruptly noticed something very wrong. While Hua Chong was a ghost, his body had never been any different from that of normal people. Yet while he was holding Hua Chong right now, those vivid red robes were somewhat transparent. Oh my god, I'm glad we have one more chapter. What? No. Shi Lian instantly grabbed a hold of him, demanding in alarm, "San Long, what's going on?" Hua Chong was still considerably at ease and replied, "Oh, it's nothing. I've just overdone it a little." Shi Lian was dumbfounded. "Well, why didn't you tell me this sooner? How can this be nothing?" "It's the spiritual powers. It was all the spiritual powers." When Hua Chong transferred spiritual powers to Shi Lian, it had always been as if there were an infinite source, endlessly all for the taking, smiling cheerfully as if it was never a burden. But it wasn't like his own spiritual power was a mountain of sand carried in by rolling waves, so how could it actually be infinite and endless? This couldn't be blamed on Hua Chong for not saying anything sooner at all, but on Shi Lian himself, who hadn't realized it earlier. Shi Lian was both panicking and feeling remorseful. "I'll return it to you." He cupped Hua Chong's face and kissed him. Feng Xin and Mu Qing originally had planned on coming over. When they saw this scene, they instantly pulled back dozens of feet away, keeping their distance and letting the two of them do whatever they needed to together. The cursed shackles were removed, so Shi Lian desperately tried to transfer all the spiritual power he could muster to Hua Chong, hoping he'd recover soon. But after kissing him for a good while, when he let go, the sleeves of Hua Chong's red robes and that pair of silver vambrances were still translucent, half transparent even. Shi Lian was shaken for a long while, fear overtaking his mind, and he subconsciously reached for Hua Chong's face, cupping it ready to kiss again, when Hua Chong, swift with his hands, cradled his own face instead, and gave him a small peck, smiling. "Although I'm happy Gege is so forward, there's no need to give me any spiritual powers anymore. But if Gege isn't lending spiritual powers and simply wanted to kiss me, I don't mind at all. In fact, the more the better. I welcome it with open arms." Shi Lian gripped him tightly, on the brink of falling apart. "What's going on?" "Just taking a little break, that's all." "Gege, don't be scared," Hua Chong replied. Shi Lian clutched his head. "How can I not be scared? I'm going crazy." By Hua Chong's personality, if it wasn't a severe problem, serious to the point where he could no longer hide it, then why would he allow Shi Lian to see him like this at all? Spiritual power so abundant it could shatter 2 cursed shackles. Just how much was that exactly? To say it was as bountiful as the sea wouldn't be an exaggeration. So how could he not be affected in the slightest? "MXTX, don't you dare!" They went through so much hardship together before this mess had been sorted, all the knots tied. Communication had been opened between them. Feng Xin and Mu Qing, the cursed shackles that had bound him for 800 years, had been released. Everything he had always wanted to confess to Hua Chong had been confessed. Yet when he turned back to run into his arms with a face full of smiles, what greeted him was a Hua Chong who had become like this. How could he not be frightened? He just might go mad. Feng Xin and Mu Qing noticed something was wrong and called out from afar, "Your Highness, what's happened?" They jogged a couple steps this way, but then for some reason or another they paused halfway, feeling they shouldn't get so close so rashly. In this moment, Shi Lian had stopped caring for anyone else. He gripped Hua Chong, his heart almost stopping, looking as if he was terrified. "What do I do?" Hua Chong quietly sighed, extending his arms, and once again folded him into an embrace. Your Highness, I've always watched you. This was the second time he had said this, but his voice was softer than before. Shilian clutched the red robes at his chest, asking, his mind blank, I know, but what should I do now? Huachang's long and slender fingers gently combed through Shilian's mussed hair. Then, Your Highness, do you know why I refuse to leave this world? Shilian couldn't understand why Huachang could still be so calm at a time like this. As he was panicking so hard he was trembling. But while feeling lost, he still simple-mindedly asked, why? Huachang replied quietly, because I have a beloved who is still in this world. Hearing this, Shilian was slightly stunned. He seemed to have heard this somewhere before. Huachang continued, my beloved is a brave, noble, and gracious someone. He saved my life, and I've looked up to him ever since I was young. But I wanted to catch up to him more and become an even stronger person for him. Although he might not remember me well, we never really talked. I wanted to protect him. He gazed at Shilian. If your dream is to save the common people, then my dream is only you. Relying on this memory, Shilian asked with a trembling voice, but you won't be able to rest in peace like this. Huachang answered, I pray to never rest in peace. In that instant, Shilian's breathing completely stopped, frozen in this moment. He could faintly hear two voices, one questioning and one answering. If your beloved knew you couldn't rest in peace because of him, he might feel guilty and troubled. Then I just won't let him know why I haven't gone. After having seen so much, it'd be known sooner or later, Shilian said. Then I won't let him find out I'm protecting him either. That ball of ghost fire, that lantern night, that weak little ghost fire he bought with a few pennies, like ghost fire who wanted to pull him up from the burial graves on a frozen winter's night. That ghost fire who blocked him in front of White No-Face and wouldn't let him go near danger. That ghost fire who had screamed in torment for him during that time when 100 swords pierced his heart. Huachang said quietly, Your Highness, I understand your everything. Your courage, your despair, your kindness, your pain, your resentment, your hate, your intelligence, your foolishness. If I could, I would have you use me as your stepping stone, the bridge you take apart after crossing, the corpse bones you need to trample to climb up, the sinner who deserved the butchering of 1,000,000 knives, but I know you wouldn't allow it. He said all this as the maple red of his robe slowly faded away. Oh no, come on, no. Shilian's shaking hands tried to grab a hold of him, and he never stopped transferring spiritual powers, but even then he couldn't prevent Huachang's form from fading slowly. His eyes were going blurry, his speech staggered, and he stammered, all right, well, don't say anything more. I get it, but don't be like this, all right, Sun Long? I've borrowed so much spiritual power from you that I haven't returned yet. And I'm actually not done saying all the things that I wanted to say earlier. There's still so much more. It's been so long since anyone listened to me talk. Won't you stay? Don't actually do this. I won't be able to take it. Twice. It's been twice already. I really don't want there to be a third time. Huachang had already vanished from this world twice because of him. However, Huachang only replied, to die in battle for you is my greatest honor. Those words were like a fatal blow. The tears in Shilian's eyes could no longer be restrained, and they came pouring out. Like he was hanging on to the last thread of his life, he pleaded, you said you would never leave me. However, Huachang replied, there is no banquet in this world that doesn't come to an end. Shilian bowed his head and buried it deep into his chest, his heart and throat in constricted agony, unable to speak. Yet soon after he heard Huachang say above him, but I will never leave you. Hearing this, Shilian's head shot up. Huachang said to him, I will come back, Your Highness. Believe me. Although his voice was firm, his face was pale and dimming, becoming transparent. Shilian reached out, wanting to touch his face, but his fingertips went through air. He was startled, and then he looked up. Huachang's gaze was gentle and blazing, that remaining eye filled with love, and it gazed at him silently. He seemed to have said something, but there was no sound. Shilian wouldn't give up, reaching out with both hands, trying to snatch him deeper into his arms, wanting to hear him better. But he disappeared before he could exert force, the one he was holding, the one holding him, had disappeared. In an instant before him, Hua-Chang shattered into thousands of silver butterflies, transforming into a breeze of twinkling stars that he could neither embrace nor hold. What the fudge? No! Xilian's arms came up empty, still maintaining a hugging position, not moving not a limb. He couldn't tell if it was because he hadn't yet come to his senses or because he couldn't move at all, and he knelt there with a dreamlike array of butterflies, his eyes widening. Further down, Fengchen and Mu-Ching had never imagined a scene like this would play out, and both their faces paled, rushing forward. Your Highness! Fengchen was the first to charge over. How did it suddenly become like this? Wasn't he fine just now? Was it because of the curse shackles? Mu-Ching hopped and hobbled over, but he couldn't jump up, so he looked up, yelling at those silver butterflies. Crimson Rainsop Flower, don't be joking around. If you're not dead, then come the hell out! Naturally, those silver butterflies did not answer him, and they fluttered erratically, flapping their wings towards the sky. Fengchen reached out to pull Xilian up, but Xilian remained sitting on the ground like a stone. Fengchen didn't know what to do anymore. Is there something we can do to help? Do you need spiritual power? Can he be saved? Just what should we do? Mu-Ching, however, had already figured things out by watching. Drop it! Just shut your mouth! Nothing can be done now. A shimmering, twinkling glow enveloped the air. The wings of the butterflies sparkling, just like the very first reunion after 800 years. A silver butterfly flew over errantly, lightly brushing the back of his hand, his cheek, his forehead full of affectionate longing, as if it was whispering goodbyes. Xilian extended a hand numbly and let it rest there. That silver butterfly seemed to be delighted, flapping its wings, and sure enough it stayed for him. But it couldn't last, and it wasn't long before it scattered with the wind. However, where it had perched on Xilian's third finger, that red string was still bright and vivid. And then, it's done. It's done! It's done. Pei Ming couldn't hold back any longer. That's not possible. How can it be? Even an amateur like me can tell it's not done. What? What? Mu-Ching dropped that heavy bookkeeping report on the table and said coolly, oh my freaking God, are you joking? Well, that's what I calculated, and it's done. I can calculate again, and on the spot right here, will General Pei please listen well? Take away 8,880,000 merits, and then add 6,660,000 merits, plus another 1,700 million merits, and 200,000 merits, then minus Fengchen interrupted. All right, that's enough. You don't need to count anymore. The numbers are right. There must have been quite a bit left out, because if that's not the case, then the numbers should have added up. Mu-Ching countered, well, that's not my problem. Either way, I didn't figure wrong. Maybe everyone should find someone else to do the accounting. If I had known things were going to be like this, I would have minded my own business. After the heavenly capital was destroyed, the scattered and jumbled up heavenly officials finally gathered again and set up a ward at the summit of Mount Taisang, a place no mortals cared for, established a temporary upper court. Currently, the heavenly officials were in the heat of discussing the building of a new heavenly capital. However, the unfortunate thing was, not only did that major fire raise all of the glorious and exuberant golden palaces of all the heavenly officials, forcing them to squeeze together and erect tents temporarily to discuss and rest, a great number of the scrolls and reports were lost. They bickered and dragged on for many days, and even now they still couldn't straighten out any accounts. One of Pei Ming's arms hung in a sling as the other rubbed his chin. Is it my imagination, or is Zhang Jin more and more sarcastic these days? Fengchen responded, hasn't he always been sarcastic? He's just too lazy to hide it now. Mu-Ching rolled his eyes and everyone pointed their fingers at him. Decorum! Mu-Ching turned away to leave. Chan Yijin was wrapped completely in bandages, a humanoid sticky rice wrapped in leaves, exposing only a head full of messy curly hair, and his words were mumbled and clear. Well, what do we do now? Who's going to do the accounting then? Everyone looked at each other, each clearing their throats, and quietly backed away. No one would take on this task that was hard labor with little return. Seeing this, Pei Ming sighed. If only Ling Wen was here. No matter what, no one can complain about the way she managed things. This mess of reports is all imprinted in her mind. Even if the palace of Ling Wen was burnt down, there'd be nothing to be afraid of. She would have definitely shown results within a day. After having struggled on this godforsaken mountain for so long, Most already thought this deep in their minds. They just didn't dare say it out loud. However, now that there was someone taking the lead, they all agreed, well, yes, I'll never say the Palace of Lingwen was inefficient again. I've already not said that in a long time. Right, then someone on the outside came to announce, everyone, Lord Rainmaster has come. Hearing this, all the heavenly officials seemed to brighten up and immediately went out to greet her without prompting. Pei Ming's expression looked unreadable. Of course it does! He seemed to hesitate for a moment, but in the end still chose not to go out. Just then another voice came. Your Highness, you've come too! Well, wait. Oh, wait, but, I don't want to stop yet! I don't want to stop yet! No! No! Forget it. I want to keep reading 2 more chapters, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm sorry, I can't wait! No! Forget the cliffhangers! Forget it! Not today! No, I was going to read 2 chapters next week, chapters 242 and 243, which is pages 125 to 150, but that's only like 24 pages left, so screw it! We're doing 5 chapters today, Mother Trucker, so get ready. So yeah, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not, no. I was like, forget this. Nope, I'm not going to wait. We're going to have 8 parts to volume 8 instead of 9. So forget that. We're going to do this here in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, we're going to go chapter 242. This is going to be a long video. I hope y'all are ready. Atop Mount Taisang, thousands of kinds of dust settle. Yeah, we can't just stop in the middle of this. We got to keep going. All of a sudden, all the heavenly officials' expressions became even more unreadable than that of Pei Ming's. So the Rainmaster has come. Okay, I was just so distraught. I was like, are we really ending it here? No. Okay. A white-clad cultivator acknowledged the address. His expression calm and peaceful, his manners easy and elegant. It was HUALIAN. The group all greeted him, Your Royal Highness, Your Highness. Their expressions and words were all very careful, polite, and courteous. HUALIAN also politely greeted everyone and went forth in a welcoming gesture to Lord Rainmaster. The Rainmaster had come before that temporarily built hut, holding the reins of that big guardian steed, Black Ox. She inclined her head over this way in greeting. On the back of that black ox were giant boxes upon giant boxes of produce. The reason she had come, apparently they had the incredible effect of nurturing spiritual powers after eating them. Oh, so when the heavenly officials heard, a group excitingly went over and divided their shares. There's also a group that didn't move. HUALIAN was one of them. The Lord Rainmaster said, I've brought something else for your highness. HUALIAN smiled. Oh, thank you in advance. What is it? The Rainmaster took out from within her sleeve something wrapped in with a small band of white cloth. And when she opened it, HUALIAN's eyes brightened instantly. Well, thank you so much, Lord Rainmaster. I've been looking everywhere for this. Function came over to take a look too and also commented, oh, rare, fantastic silk. This is great. Now you can finally fix that toy of yours. Oh, yeah, Rui. Oh my God, so much happened in these chapters. I forgot about Rui. Oh, HUALIAN rummaged around his sleeve and fumbled out a white silk band that was torn in half and said joyously, yeah, finally the material to fix Rui is found. I'll go patch it up right now. However, Function stopped and patch it up. You, forget it. What can you patch? Ask someone else to help. Then he turned his head and shouted, Mu-Ching, come here. Come get to work. Mu-Ching walked over lazily and replied coolly, What? What are you trying to say? Tell me to sew it? Isn't that your expertise? Function said. Mu-Ching humphed. Are you too good at using people? Taking me for a servant you can order around again? Tomorrow you'll probably tell me to sweep the floor. HUALIAN laughed. Never mind, I'll do it myself. But Mu-Ching had already taken the strips of white silk from his hands, rolling his eyes as he went to search for a needle and thread. After that, Pei Ming came over to give a greeting too. He was thinking of patting the black ox, but that ox chomped down his teeth loudly, almost breaking Pei Ming's fingers. Seeing he wasn't welcome, he left in a hurry. The Lord Rainmaster inquired, Is General Pei's arm not recovered? Still not recovered? Not yet, HUALIAN replied. At the time, he made an agreement with Rong Guang to use the sword Ming Guang other than his apology. He also had to pay an arm as the price. Although, in the end, Rong Guang's resentment had dispersed, such that he didn't ask for the arm, which left him some face, but he was still heavily injured. I see, Rainmaster said. No wonder General Pei looked off. Gee, HUALIAN, muttered inwardly, that's definitely not why General Pei looked off. Yes. It turns out Pei Ming could not get over the fact that the Rainmaster had saved him, and time again at Mount Tonglu and in the Great Fires of the Heavenly Capital. He was a big man, a strong man, who thought himself as domineering the heavens and earth, so he could not withstand losing a teensy bit of face in front of a woman at all, especially a woman he had a past grievance with. Compared to the Rainmaster, he'd probably accept the behavior of Shanji more. In any case, he couldn't let it go no matter what, and whenever he saw the Rainmaster, he felt agitated, which is why he looked off. However, the Rainmaster didn't understand at all what he was feeling turbulent over. So she always smiled politely in greeting, the two on completely different wavelengths, truly inexplicably absurd. The Rainmaster spoke up. Oh, that's right, Your Highness, how is Shanji? Shanji's been locked up at the foot of the mountain, Shilian replied. Did you want to go see her? Oh, after the great battle, all the monsters and demons that had escaped their seals from all over at the beginning were temporarily detained in a dungeon at the foot of Mount Taisang that was set up at the interim. Shilian led the way, but before they reached the dungeon, they heard rough voices swearing. Peisu and Banyu were sitting at the entrance, both their expressions blank. At the moment, they lacked serious helping hands, so the two of them were sent over to help the upper court guard the dungeon. Within the dungeon was the locked Kamo, and when he saw his enemies, his eyes turned especially red, and he spent his days yelling and cursing up and down the heavens nonstop at those two. The two of them pretended they couldn't understand his words and sat together in a row like wooden dolls. When Shilian and Rainmaster entered, they rose to their feet. Your Highness, Lord Rainmaster. The Rainmaster passed a box of produce to them, and Shilian said, Thank you two for your hard work. The Lord Rainmaster wants to see Shanji. However, Peisu hesitated for a moment. Shanji. Shilian noticed something was wrong and asked, Is something the matter? The two entered the dungeon and found where Shanji was detained. They were both taken aback. There was nothing within the cell. All that remained was a ragged, torn red bridal robe. Peisu explained Shanji dissipated last night. Shanji's resentment actually dispersed. How incredible. It wasn't that long ago when this woman's obsession was still so deep that she was choking Pei Ming in a deadly hold of refusing to let go. Shilian remarked, perhaps she finally thought things through. Though, just how in the past century she becomes such an insane, despicable, grudging woman, so different from a heroic general, a dignified lady of a prestigious house. Thought through what she had lost and what she had gained, and in such shame and embarrassment she probably didn't have the face to look back. She had hoped all this time that she could change the heart of the man who deserted her, either by moving his heart or with threats, but then violently realized there was never a chance to turn things around from the beginning, and so she finally understood. But she was relying on her aggravated feelings, her refusal to yield towards Pei Ming in order to remain in this world. The moment she thought things through, there was no longer any reason to stay. Even thinking about it was a little absurd. The Rainmaster sat down on the spot, looking like she was going to perform a passing service for her. After all, Shanji was the only one left of the kingdom of Yushi besides herself. It'd be impolite of Shilian to disturb her, so he stood down and left. Oh. After exiting, he saw Peisu and Banyu were munching on the fruits that the Rainmaster had brought them, so Shilian went over and picked one up, ready to crunch down to munch with them. Yet unexpectedly, he sensed something and whipped his head around to look. He saw not far in the distance in the bushes, there were as tall as half a man something that had blitzed by. Shilian instantly tossed the fruit and only said, Watch over things here, before dashing out. The thing in the bushes noticed that it had been discovered and fled even faster. Shilian couldn't have caught up 8 steps at first, but he only had taken 4 steps before he discovered who it was. Changing his mind, he slowed his pace. He waited until the creature had fled for a stretch before he suddenly broke in from the side, blocking the other's path. Lady Jeanlon, do you plan on leaving without bidding farewell? Ah! The other party was indeed Jeanlon, who was sneaking around with the fetus spirit cradled in her arms. She jumped in surprise at Shilian, who had appeared out of nowhere. Oh, you! That blanched fetus spirit was baring its teeth in her arms, looking like it wanted to attack, but Jeanlon held it down. Are you here to stop me? Shilian didn't want her to be too alarmed and said, Well, don't be nervous. I just wanted to give you something. Then he took out an item. Your son Soso's grudge is rather strong. It needs to be restrained. Although it's already undergoing purification, your cultivation isn't as high as his, so it would be hard to guarantee 0 accidents. You'll need this to assist you. The item was a protection charm HUALIAN made himself, and he even demonstrated how to use it to prove there were no tricks embedded. Jeanlin watched, and her tension did indeed relax. After all, this thing was useful. After some hesitation, she took it. Thanks. No need, HUALIAN said. As long as, when you use it, you shout 3 times, Your Highness, please bless me. It'll do. That way, this will be marked under the name of my palace. Jeanlin took a few steps, and then paused for a moment. In the end, she still couldn't hold it in, and she turned her head. You're not stopping me? Why? HUALIAN was waiting for her to look back, and asked her instead of answering. Then, Lady Jeanlin, why must you go? Function said he would take care of you both. He'll keep his word. Jeanlin's expression flickered, but in the end she sighed. I know he will. But forget it. It's for the best. I don't want to be with him anymore. HUALIAN was a little taken aback. Do you not love him at all anymore? Jeanlin was probably tired from running and sat down on the roadside. This has nothing to do with love anymore. I don't want him to force himself to tie us to him. HUALIAN also sat down by her side and contemplated for a moment. He must really love you. Back then he was so completely spent, but he still refused to let you go. Hearing this, Jeanlin looked as if she remembered things from a faraway past, and she laughed. Since you mentioned it, I remember now. Back then he was still a little dumb, spending long hours to make money, and after he made money he'd buy me for an entire night. But all he did was bring over a stool to sit with me all night, doing nothing but chatting. Everyone took him for a joke. What a laugh. HUALIAN also smiled. You see, I told you he really loves you. However, Jeanlin withdrew her smile. What you've said are all things of the past. What was love once doesn't mean it'll last. I'm not interested in being a charity case and a nuisance. Why would you think you're both a nuisance? HUALIAN asked. Don't you know the kind of person Function is? You, His Highness the Crown Prince, you've never lived the common life, so of course you'd think things are that simple. He won't now, and he won't on the surface either. But once time gets dragged out, then nothing can be sure. If I wanted to seek him out, I would have done so a long time ago. It's not like the Temple of Nanyang is hard to find, but there was a period of time where they were everywhere, but I still didn't want to. He's ascended. He's got everything, looking glorious and impressive, but we've already turned into ghosts. So what am I doing seeking him out? A heavenly official carrying 2 ghosts, isn't that just trouble for him? I kicked him away when I looked my best. I think that's quite good, all proud and dignified. That way, I would always look that way to him in his heart, and not like this tacky, heavy makeup, crow's feet all around my eyes. She pinched her own face. If he really recognized us, and every day he had to look at this face of mine in So-So's form like this, with us dragging him down, he would only become more and more tired, annoyed, and one day we would become a nuisance. So why bother? Isn't that too tragic? While she was speaking, the fetus spirit was using its wet, slithering tongue to lick her face, looking inexplicably disgusting but mischievously endearing. But to most people, this was probably only disgusting and couldn't be accepted. Jeanlin petted the bare head of her son. Anyway, having So-So is enough for me, who hasn't made promises or swore to the mountains and the seas when they were young, talking of affection, of love, of forevers. But the longer I hang around the world, the more I understand. Something like forever is impossible. It's never going to be possible. Having it once was already good enough. No one can truly achieve it. I don't believe in it anymore. She said with a helpless voice, Function is a good man. It's really been too long. Everything's changed, so it's best to let it go. HUALIAN listened silently, not speaking a word, but in his heart he said no. In his heart he said forever exists. There's one person who can truly achieve it. I believe. Jeanlin still took So-So and left. HUALIAN went back and saw off the Rainmaster, who had finished the passing service for Shanji and returned to Mount Taisang. He was thinking of telling Function that Jeanlin had left, but he didn't see him. Just as he was looking for him among the rowdy crowd, someone suddenly shouted, Great timing, Taihua! Are you free? Come help us figure this out! They were still grabbing anyone to do the accounting, and Lan Shanxi was desperate to get away, responding from afar, Don't bring the stack here, I've got things to do, go find someone else. Xilian sighed, wondering if he should go and give all those books a try when unexpectedly he had only taken a few steps before he heard a voice from behind him. Your Highness. Xilian looked back, and Lan Chunshu was standing right behind him. Do you have a moment to step aside and speak? Of course, Xilian replied, and thus he and Lan Chunshu walked together outside that sad giant hut of a palace. As they walked, Xilian inquired, How's Goozy doing? Is he all right? Lan Chunshu chuckled helplessly, a little bitter. I don't know if it's considered all right. That child asks me for his dad every day. It's rather pitiful. So I could only gather a bit of the soul particles of the green ghost and keep them in a lamp. Now he shows up in front of me every day hugging that lamp, asking when the soul within the lamp will grow bigger. Looking at that grim, dispirited face, just thinking of it, Xilian could understand. Why did he have to do something like this for Qi-Rong, who had murdered his entire family? Xilian had subconsciously reached out to pat his shoulder, but then he remembered what he himself had done in Yongin and he held back. He said gently, You've worked hard. Then what did you want to talk about with me today? After some hesitation, Lan Chunshu reached into his robes and took something out and passed it to him. This. The moment Xilian saw the thing, his breathing stopped. It was an opulent, smooth, and luminescent little crimson coral pearl. His voice trembled. This is. Lan Chunshu said this coral pearl was a secret treasure left by the founding father of Yongin. Only having heard this did Xilian realize that this wasn't the one tied to the end of Hua Chong's hair, but the one once gifted to Long Ying. It wasn't Hua Chong's. Xilian felt a little disappointed, but he still took the pearl. Just then, Lan Chunshu continued, the founding father once said, the one who gave him this red coral pearl was his savior, someone who had helped him. A very good man. Lan Chunshu went on, but he still did something that made that man lose everything. The founding father said he didn't regret doing what he did. He had to do it. Though afterwards, when he thought about it, he still felt like he had wronged that man. And then, Xilian said. And then, Lan Chunshu said, that day at the heavenly capital, I looked at that bead at the end of the crimson rain sought flower's hair carefully. And the more I looked, the more I thought it resembled the one that father had left me. Later, I heard General Shanjin and the others talking, and I learned that those pearls were actually a pair and that they belonged to you. So I came to ask, is this yours? A moment later, Xilian nodded slowly. It's mine. It's a pair of pearls my father and my mother gave me when I was young. Lan Chunshu scratched his head. Then I'm giving it back to you. He still didn't know how to address Xilian, and after having returned the pearl, he wavered around for a bit before leaving silently. Xilian stood on the same spot that red coral pearl squeezed in the heart of his palm. It had been over 800 years. After all the twists and turns, the other half of that pair of crimson coral pearl earrings had returned into his hands. It was his, and also his. But that other pearl should have been present here too. They should have been able to complete the pair. Right then, the loud, overjoyed voice of Feng Xin came from the bottom of the mountain. Your Highness, everyone come quick! Okay, fine. This is all fine. Everything's great. Xilian tucked the pearl away and gazed over. Several heavenly officials also emerged from the crude giant hut. What's going on with General Nanfeng? But then they heard Feng Xin call out, Look who I've captured! He crashed out of the woods and came dashing up, a black-clad individual dragged by his hands, and the heavenly officials were shocked. Ling Wen! Oh! The one gripped in Feng Xin's hands was indeed Ling Wen. Feng Xin turned to Xilian. Just as you suspected, Ling Wen went to steal the brocade immortal. Oh! Okay, let's give us more info on this. After removing the cursed shackles, Xilian's spiritual powers explosively increased to the point where he was practically Junwu's equal. So the brocade immortal naturally couldn't do anything to him. Ling Wen was turned into a dromedal by Hua Chong. That's right, that's where they were. Oh my god. And went missing during the great battle. Okay, well this is all coming together. I was like, I had so many questions for the discussions and now it's all starting to make sense. Okay, I was like, wait a minute, what about Ling Wen? Now it's great, okay. Once a period of time was up, the spell on her person would release automatically. so she couldn't be found anywhere. However, HUALIAN figured she would most likely come to steal the brocade immortal, so he took off those robes and asked the ghost city to let word spread. And sure enough, Lingwen took the bait. Oh my God! I was like in my head preparing like notes of what was left behind, but this is all answering questions. Even as a fugitive, when Lingwen was arrested and taken to the conference hall, she still didn't appear panicked. The moment Pei Ming came in, he pressed down her shoulder and sat her down in front of a table. He admonished in a dark voice, "We finally found you, Lingwen. You had to pay for your sins." Dozens of heavenly officials also came surrounding her, each of them with the eyes of wolves and tigers, their expressions thirsty and starving, practically savage. Only then did Lingwen feel a little bit of trepidation. "What are you all planning?" There was a thump, and a stack of report and scrolls close to the height of a full-grown man were thrown before her, so heavy the table and chairs all shook. Pei Ming said, "Pa!" and slapped down the scrolls. "These, take care of them." Lingwen seemed to sigh a breath of relief, then felt inexplicably baffled. Yet unexpectedly, before her breath fully exhaled, there was another roar of a thump, 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 thump. Dozens of thumps later, dozens of stacks of documents and reports taller than a man had also crashed down, and she was heavily surrounded. Those dozens of heavenly officials babbled in between the cracks of those stacks. "We've been waiting for you for days now. Hurry up and help figure this out. Take care of these too. Remember to fill in the missing parts. You'd better get this done within the hour." Lingwen. After a day and a night, Lingwen was finally released from the temporary conference hall. After a day and night of hard battle, all the mass of scrolls and reports had been taken care of, each categorized and organized neatly and in order. The heavenly officials cheered, and each received the accounts of their own palace and went to double check. Lingwen, on the other hand, was wearing a steely blue face, and those dark circles under her eyes that had disappeared for a period of time had returned. On the other side, everyone finished double checking and were all rejoicing. Pei Ming praised, "It certainly is Noble Ji who is the most efficient. Now everything matches. It's cleared. Thanks so much for Lord Lingwen." As a criminal, Lingwen could only chuckle politely amidst the praise from the crowd of heavenly officials. "It's nothing. It's nothing." Seeing this, all the heavenly officials in the hall who were still a mess but didn't stuff their accounts over couldn't sit still anymore, and they came circling her. "Oh, actually, I've got some books that I forgot to give my lord. I was wondering if perhaps you'd take a look." Lingwen was like, HUALIAN had been eating a steamed bun, crouching outside the temporary conference hall, and after he finished, he clapped his hands clean and finally rescued Lingwen from suffering. "Everyone, let's figure this out later. Let Lingwen catch her breath first." But before, when he spoke up, there would definitely be no one who cared, but now things weren't the same. Several people responded, "Your Highness is right," and didn't dare to speak more. Lingwen sat in her chair, a hand covering over her forehead, her eyes closed, waiting for the other heavenly officials to exit. It was only after the conference hall was deserted before she turned to HUALIAN. "Congratulations. Hi, Your Highness. Your spiritual powers have returned. What a good strategy. Now even ghosts are your worshippers, obeying your orders. How unimaginable." "They're not my worshippers," HUALIAN replied. "They're just friends from the ghost city. I only asked them for help." Lingwen nodded, her face full of understanding. A moment later, HUALIAN spoke up. "Lingwen, there's something I wanted to ask you." "Your Highness, go ahead," Lingwen said. Huang Chongzhu," HUALIAN started. "He's worn this brocade immortal of yours, but the brocade immortal didn't work on him. Do you know why?" "So it's this question," Lingwen said. "I thought your Highness already knew." "Tell me!" Lingwen straightened her sleeves and sat up poised. "Your Highness, have you heard the legend of the brocade immortal, right? Well, I've heard you forged it yourself." "You can say that," Lingwen said, "although I never thought the resentment gathered on this robe would turn into a monster. I did kill Bai Jing to speed up the destruction of the kingdom of Zhuli. That's not wrong." HUALIAN listened intently. Lingwen continued, "This robe made rounds around the mortal realm, passing through countless hands. And after having it in hand, countless individuals chose to use it for murder, to harm, to deceive. While this can take away some of its resentment, Bai Jing isn't someone like that. He didn't like being used by those people. He hated them. So whenever he met wearers similar to him, and the chosen people were given the robe, his resentment wouldn't be excited, and instead he'd become glad." "And the wearers and receivers are," Lingwen answered. "You put the brocade on mortal. on Crimson Rain sought flower. But in your heart there was not a single trace of malintent or desire to harm. You trust him with your whole being. And for the Crimson Rain sought flower, he was the same when it came to you. No, in fact, he was even more. What made it really feel aligned with the Crimson Rain sought flower was it didn't matter if he was wearing the brocade immortal. He would do everything you asked him to do without hesitation, including dying for you. This was also how I guessed the boy next to you was the Crimson Rain sought flower at the time. Although I don't know too much of the affairs between you two, I figure there was another who could be like this. There wasn't another who could be like this. Why is that? HUALIAN asked. Lingwen raised her hand and pointed. Your Highness, what's that around your neck? HUALIAN was taken aback and unconsciously moved his hand to cover it. Lingwen spoke. I've seen things like it before. The very unique ghosts who gift their lovers their ashes. Yes! Okay. Countless scrolls and reports had passed through the palace of Lingwen, so it wasn't strange that she had seen it before. But truth be told, HUALIAN had guessed it himself. However, hearing when Lingwen say it so out loud, he still squeezed that crystal clear ring tight. It's a very rare item, Lingwen said. But because it's too beautiful, it often ends in tragedy, so my impression of it is stronger. What do you mean, often ends in tragedy? HUALIAN said. To have love blind your reason and give objects tied to your life to someone else would have many tragic and horrifying consequences, Lingwen said. Something like a genuine heart is made to be trampled. All those keepsakes made of ashes, some were stolen by others, some were shattered by their owners. Basically, nothing ended well. Although your Highness is an exception, you kept it well, practically impenetrable. After a long silence, HUALIAN said, You said similar to him. So was General Baijing like this too? Lingwen smiled slightly. Why else would he be deceived by me? It's really not deception, though, is it? HUALIAN said. There was no way you didn't realize I was intentionally letting the word out. But you still came to take it. It's a good defensive device, Lingwen said. If it was only a device for defense, you wouldn't have gone through such risks to steal it in the first place. After you failed, you still took it to Mount Tonglu. Lingwen said apathetically, what else was there to do other than take it to Mount Tonglu? I was already exposed. Your Highness was the one who caught me red-handed. But truthfully, if you wanted to find an excuse to cover it up, it still works, HUALIAN said. Bribe your way around a little, even getting demoted or having merits deducted wouldn't have landed you a fugitive status. The main point being, you wanted to help General Baijing in becoming a supreme and have him come back to his senses, right? Lingwen gave a small laugh. Your Highness, don't say it like I would do anything for him. After all, I'm cold-blooded and recognize no loved ones. So why would I do anything like that? Is that right? Let it be. Damn, girl. Man. HUALIAN cleaned up around the wrecked and broken cliffs of the Royal Holy Pavilion and put up a simple cottage, using it as a temporary residence. Okay, he's got the damn string. He's got the ashes. Now bring him back, damn it. Come on now. Don't you do this in MXTX. I'm reading 2 chapters ahead. Come on now. Using it as temporary residence. It was further away and more deserted. When there was a need for him, he'd go to the conference hall to help. And when there wasn't anything, he'd stay in the cottage by himself quietly. After several days, Muqing repaired Ruyi and came to deliver it. The moment HUALIAN opened the door, he saw something white pouncing at him, and his vision was covered. He raised his hand to yank off that thing, and Ruyi began to twist and swivel again, like it was showing off its beautiful body after being reborn. Oh. HUALIAN admonished, don't go twisting around like that after just getting repaired. Be careful of tearing yourself again. The moment Muqing heard this, he had an opinion. Well, how is that possible? What robes of yours have been torn after I've patched them up for you? That's true, HUALIAN said. He caught Ruyi, who was twisted like a seaweed, to check it over carefully. It indeed was extremely well sewn. There was practically no trace of it ever being torn. He praised, your craft is still so amazing. A compliment like this won't delight me, Muqing said. I'm only doing this once. There won't be a next time. I'm never doing this again. You're clearly super proud of this, HUALIAN thought. Muqing nagged for another bit and then said, all right, I've done my job. I'm gone. I'm just in the middle of getting some things and personal care taken care of at the Palace of Zujin. You're leaving too? HUALIAN asked. All right. I'll go over to help out a bit. All right, I'll go over to help out in a bit. Remember to give me a shout when you leave. I'll send you off. After capturing Ling Wen, filling in all the missing blanks, and clearing up that pile of messed up accounts, the heavenly officials finally decided to rebuild the heavenly capital, which meant this temporary conference hall at Mount Taisang would also be left behind. Muqing waved his hand, neither dismissive nor agreeing, and he took a few steps before halting and looked back. Are you going to stay in Mount Taisang? Shilian nodded, yeah. After a moment of hesitation, Muqing spoke up. Why don't you come with us after all? Shilian smiled. Nah, I've got to wait for someone. You can still wait after getting to the upper court of the new heavenly capital, Muqing reasoned. Shilian shook his head. I think when he comes back, he'd come here first. Then I'd be able to meet him the moment he returns. If he doesn't return to this place, he might return to the Qianding Temple of the Ghost City. And the Ghost City isn't far from here, much more convenient than the new heavenly capital. Muqing seemed to have held his tongue for a long while now, and he asked with a complicated expression, You really believe he'll come back? Shilian replied like it was the most logical thing in the world. Of course. People came like the tide and left like the tide. Mount Taisang regained its deserted lonesomeness. Atop Mount Taisang, there used to be an enormous field of maple trees. They were all burnt down by that massive fire, but reborn after 1,000 years. They were no longer the same ones that Shilian leapt through to train once upon a time, but the landscape was the same. Shilian often strolled in the maple forest by himself, an entire mountain of red maples that spread like the passionate feral fire that made him feel as if he was in a giant and warm embrace. He had spent over 800 years of life passing the days on his own. He was very used to it. When there was work to be done, he'd go down the mountain to answer some prayers, collect some junk, and if there wasn't anything, then he'd plant some vegetables, cook some meals. Only what was strange was, days spent on his own like this used to be the most normal thing in the past, but now they'd become hard to pass. Shilian spent a long time before he got used to it again. Perhaps when a person has only ever eaten that which is bitter, then they would be used to the taste of bitterness. But if suddenly one day someone gave them a taste of sweetness, to eat what was bitter with the thought of sweetness would probably bring a frown to their face. In the past, when Shilian passed his days in simplicity and quietude, he'd often secretly hoped that someone would come look for him, seek him out to chat, or seek him out for assistance. At least it'd be a sign of life. But now, he didn't like that as much anymore. Since now, every time he heard a knocking on the door, his heart would jolt in happiness and fill with hope. When he dashed to the door and opened it, the one who's standing outside the entrance was never the one he was waiting for. Sometimes it was Feng Shen, sometimes it was Muqing, other times it was Qingchong. Sometimes it was the many ghosts from the Ghost City here to offer respects to their senior. Everyone was good, it's just none of them were the one he was waiting for. In the first month, Shilian hauled over several flowering trees to plant by the entrance, beautifying the surroundings a little to hide away the crudeness of that dilapidated cottage. He'd figured perhaps when Huachong returned they would blossom. The second month, Shilian tore down the entire cottage and rebuilt it. And he also pulled all the weeds of the entirety of Mount Taisang. Otherwise, when Huachong came back and saw this mess, he would definitely send people over to help him clean. The third month, the flowering trees had blossomed. Cherry reds enveloped the trees, and Shilian stood under them, his head raised as he gazed. As he enjoyed the blossoms, he thought the flowers are in full bloom. He should be home soon. The fourth month, all the mountain paths had been reconstructed. That way, when Huachong came back to find him, he could hike the mountain faster. The fifth month, Feng Shen and Muqing had come to visit him again. They asked if he wanted to leave the place for a bit to take a walk outside. Shilian hosted a meal and they ran off! The sixth month, the flowering period was over. He waited and waited, waited and waited. Shilian wasn't anxious and he didn't break down, nor did he weep in agony. Instead, he felt he was becoming more and more calm and more patient. Thinking of it, who hadn't experienced the passing of long ages on their own? Huachong waited for him for over 800 years. So what did it matter if he waited for Huachong for another 800 more? It could be 1,000 years, 10,000 years, and he would still wait and continue to wait. Never mind that it had only been a year. On this day, Schillian collected a large pile of junk as usual and piled it high on the cart and pulled by an ox, both of which Schillian had recently saved for and purchased. And he pulled it up the mountain. Oh my God, it's just like when they first met! Oh! Crossing through the maple forest, halfway up the mountain path, Schillian turned his head back inadvertently and saw some glimmering glows in the night sky. He stared at them deeply and discovered they were the everlasting blessings lanterns. And then it dawned on him. He mumbled to himself, so it's the Shangyan festival today. At this moment, all the heavenly officials in the upper court were probably battling lanterns again. Schillian pulled the reins in spite of himself and stopped where he was, watching those blessing lanterns in a daze. He suddenly remembered that he and Hua Chong had first met during the Shangyan festival. That year, a small child with a face covered in filth and gashes squeezed through the swarming crowd and looked down the city walls. The 17-year-old crown prince of Shanla was glowing, and the moment he looked up, he saw the silhouette of a person falling, and without thinking, he leapt to his feet. The auspicious Shangyan festival upon the great Marshall Avenue, the awe-inspiring first impression that had led to centuries of disgrace. The word used in Chinese also connotates to pining. A smile hung on Schillian's face, thinking he wasn't the only one who had fallen. Turning around, Schillian bowed his head and was ready to keep going up the mountain path. The cart pulled, creaking for a stretch of the road, when suddenly the path seemed to be illuminated by something far ahead. Schillian lifted his head once more, his eyes widening. The light was lanterns. Oh, shut up. Oh, shut up. Oh, shut up. Like millions of fish swimming through the gorges into the sea, countless blessing lanterns slowly rose from the mountain peaks. They were brilliant, glowing, and shimmering in the black night. The most beautiful dream, exceedingly magnificent, had brightened his path. Schillian had seen this sight before, and now that he was seeing again, both his breathing and his heart were going to stop. The mountain path turned, and the cartwheels spun, and Schillian saw that little dilapidated cottage that he had built. And there was someone there! Oh my God! Before that slanted little cottage... Before that slanted little cottage stood a red-clad man, his figure long and slender. A silver scimitar hung at his waist. His back was facing Schillian while he lifted and sent off the last everlasting blessings lantern as it took off into the sky errantly. And Schillian was frozen in his seat, wondering if he was still in a dream or if this was a hallucination. Along with the turning of the wheels, he came closer and closer. That man turned around, and he could also see him clearer and clearer. With 3,000 blessing lanterns rising along the night behind him, the man turned back and gazed at him. Robes redder than maple, skin as white as snow, between the brows of a face so handsome it couldn't be stared at. There was still that wildness and a feral aura, a proudness that couldn't be cut down. Although he was wearing a black eye patch, an eye that was as bright as the stars was gazing unblinkingly at Schillian. Schillian scrambled down. There were no words. But both started walking towards each other. A step, another step, each step faster than the next. And then finally they started running. They ran fast forward while tears fell. And he ran forward while tears fell and stayed behind him. Schillian voiced this in his heart. He believed. He believed this man would die for him again and again, and would be reborn from over and over. Even if he fell into the depths of hell, he would break through the abyss for his belief. Last time, they spent 800 years running towards each other. This time, it only took an instant to fall into each other's embrace. Oh my God! So I'm sorry I lied to you all and said this was going to be 3 chapters. And it ended up being 5. If it were up to me, I'd keep reading. But I can't deny it. I've read too much. I just knew at the end of those 3 chapters when Hua Chang disappeared, I'm like, that's bullshit. He's gonna come back. We know because of the red string. We know because of the ring. He's gonna come back. How dare you, MXTX? And I just couldn't do it. I was like, no. So. Well, now he's back at the end, so we're like not even halfway through the book. So like I said last week, I'm wondering if a lot of this is going to be like, if a lot of it is going to be looking at the extras, maybe at extras in this series, looking at like the epilogue to see like HUALIAN rebuilt the Poochie Shrine. We're going to talk about that. So maybe they're going to stay there. Maybe they'll go to the Ghost City. Oh my God. There was a lot of emotion wrapped up in these last chapters, and part of me wanted to cry the moment that like you realize they were like the moment that HUALIAN was like redoing everything that had to do with like the Poochie Shrine and the first time they met and time passing and all of this. Like, I don't usually cry reading things. It takes like certain things to trigger me, and so like I'm sure people sobbed reading this. Internally, I was sobbing because I was like, this is so beautiful and wonderful, and all the callbacks and everything. And this cover is them meeting together. The moment they were talking, the moment he said the lanterns were coming out, I was like, oh my God, this is the cover. This is it. This is what it's for. I was like, but how dare MXTX do a fake out Hua Chang disappearing? I was like, MXTX, you are not letting our protagonist couple not be together. I know too well from Azushi, don't you dare! So we get 3 pictures with this chapter set, if you can believe it. 3 pictures. I was like, holy cow, we got a lot. One picture, which of course is the curse shackle breaking. God, I love that so much. I love it so much. I love that. Curse shackle breaking. Amazing. Poor Mei Nianqing sitting there with Junwoo. We're going to talk about that. Oh my God. That whole business. And then like, oh, with his hand like on his chest too. How dare. And then of course, the last image is like the one I was like, no! I was like, them disappearing in a bunch of butterflies. I was getting Corpse Bride Corpse Bride flashbacks. If you've not seen Corpse Bride, there's this ghost, this corpse, Emily, and she like falls in love with this guy, but then at the end she like saves him, but that like frees her from her imprisonment, and she bursts into these silver butterflies, and it's the most beautiful, heartbreaking thing, and you're just like, and it's great. So yeah, so there's that. And as soon as the butterfly picture happened, I stopped this recording after the 3 chapters, and I went to that picture in the book, and I said, no, I'm going to read ahead to what I was going to read next week, which was chapters 242 and 243. I'm like, no, I'm going to read ahead to those chapters. How dare you? Nope. I'm going to read ahead to them. I'm going to go ahead and do it and do that, and then go and see what we get from there. So I was like, don't you try, story. So yeah, so we ended up with 5 chapters instead of 3. But I was like, after all that big deal I'd made of reading ahead, there was no way I was going to end with another rotten cliffhanger like that. No way, no sir, no how. So this, we're gonna mark this off as we go. Right, we're gonna go in chronological order and see what we have left to talk about. As soon, because a lot of this is going to come off today. A lot of this is going to come off. We're going to be left with a very little bit left. I'm going to have to reorganize it for the rest of volume 8, but oh my God, that's where we're at. That's where we're at in this. Oh my God. So yeah, just going through this episode, the curse shackle breaking, all of that. We still don't know. I guess we ought to talk about this as we go, about the sword feng. It's funny they keep calling it Feng Shin and Zushin throughout this chapter set. They can't really decide what they want to call it, so they just keep going back and forth through all of this. And the idea of Junwoo just getting so powerful, but Junwoo wanting to be defeated at this point. And I kind of like that idea that Junwoo got to a point where he just wanted to be defeated, but he was also kind of like so proud that he wasn't just going to let himself be defeated. He was like, no. And Junwoo was powerful enough that he really couldn't, right? It's kind of like it kept reminding me when HUALIAN tried to hang himself and it didn't work and Ryu was born. It kind of reminded me of that with Junwoo, that Junwoo kept trying at this point to like destroy himself and it just wasn't working. And he's like, well, screw it. I'll just destroy everything then. And then finally, as it were, they were able to destroy him and stop him. So it's kind of like, it was what he wanted in the end. And I'm assuming he's dead. I'm assuming that Junwoo is dead. And then Mei Nyan-ching just sat there with him. And maybe, I don't know. The question is, would Junwoo come back? You know, would he be reborn? Is that a possibility? Did Mei Nyan-ching stay at Mount Tonglu? I'm assuming that we'll find that out by the end of this. I'm guessing. I'm going to put that on here. Up here, I'm going to put Mei Nyan-ching and Junwoo. Is he completely dead for sure? I feel like Junwoo's dead. I feel like Junwoo has died. I feel like that's the end of his character. The question is, would he possibly be reborn? Would Mei Nyan-ching stay at, Mount Tonglu as penance? Or would he eventually leave? What about the mountain spirits? Are they suddenly going to be able to pass on in peace? Because HUALIAN noted that it seemed like they were fading away. I would like for MXTX to clarify what happened with Mei Nyan-ching, if he just stayed there or what happened. But if we're talking about Modao Zushi, I guess if I were to relate, and this is some Modao Zushi spoilers, so warning for that. I guess I would honestly relate Junwoo and Mei Nyan-ching's relationship to that of Jishin and Yao. Because at the end, Yao ended up dying and Jishin kind of, not the way that Junwoo died, because Mei Nyan-ching was not really involved in the death of Mei Nyan-ching like that. Not as directly as Jishin was with Yao. But I felt like at the end, when Junwoo kind of died in Mei Nyan-ching's arms, that to me was very similar to Jishin, like with Yao at the very end. And I'm going to be interested to see if in the aftermath, if Mei Nyan-ching kind of like goes into like withdrawals from everybody else and kind of is like atoning or trying to like grieve the loss of Junwoo by being off by themselves on Mount Tonglu, kind of like Jishin receding and going away in mourning from Yao. So I don't know if that'll end up happening or not, but it could very well happen. Who knows? Who knows, right? But oh my God, this final battle. It felt like such a nail biter, because you kept thinking that something really bad was going to happen to these characters. I will admit, in Modao Zushi, in that final battle, I did not feel the tension that I felt in these chapters here. Because I don't know, there was just something about Modao Zushi, you kind of knew that, again, there's going to be some Modao Zushi spoilers, so if you've not read Modao Zushi, I'm sorry. It's throughout. I'm going to just have to put a big disclaimer throughout this part here that they're just there. But it just didn't ever feel like, I felt like Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji, they were going to be fine by the end of it, and nobody else was really going to die. And I didn't think Chang was going to die, or Jishin, or any of them. I thought they were going to be fine. It was just a question of, okay, well, how do we beat them, right? In this, I did genuinely think for a second that the fetus spirit was going to die, that Mu Qing might have died, that the Goshi could have died, that Feng Xin and Mu Qing were in danger, and Hua Chong was in danger. Like, I genuinely felt that there was some real tension here. Like, oh shit, people could actually die here, and that's going to be the end of them. And then the moment that he dispersed into butterflies, I was like, MXTX, don't you dare. Do not dare make us go. Because yeah, even HUALIAN said at the end, he was like, I did all of these things. I came all of this way. I finally confessed to you, and you're going to leave forever? And I was like, exactly, right? You can't do that to us, MXTX. How dare? And then Hua Chong, when he was like, I'll come back, I was like, I was like, you can't give us that stress, MXTX. I can't imagine reading this week to week. No, there's no way. I can't imagine, or however long there was between chapters. I don't know how long there were between chapters in this story. I cannot imagine reading one chapter. I'm only reading like 4 or 5 a week. I can't imagine one chapter for a time period and then you being like, well, I hope everything's okay. I'm like, no! It was crazy, right? It was just absolutely crazy. But The armor is powerful and it may not crack from 100 blows. I loved this opening part of chapter 239 because it just shows like this. What I love about it is you have HUALIAN and Hua Chong's faith in one another. And the idea that there we go. And the idea that HUALIAN, well, the thing of it is, it kind of happens two ways. Because on the one hand, you have Mu Qing being like, there's no way we can beat him. There's no way we can penetrate his armor. And HUALIAN's like, just keep trying. We can do it. Just keep going. And initially reading that, I was like, oh, well, HUALIAN's just kind of saying, no, I have faith in Hua Chong. I know we can do this. And it was a nice contrast to Mu Qing not having faith. But then we find out the little rub of it, that HUALIAN, back when he fought Junwu, when he descended a second time, he had been fighting him with 3,000 swords. 3,000 swords. I'm sorry. That was one moment when MXTX gave us that reveal that HUALIAN had used over 3,000 swords and 400 of them had stabbed him and 100 of them had pierced that one spot. The 100 piercing the one spot reminded me of the 100 swords piercing HUALIAN. Like, that parallel was there. But I was also like, why didn't we get to see that? Because at first, when HUALIAN, at first it was a cop-out because we're like, oh, the second dissension, we don't get to see it. And then you kind of feel a little bit better whenever you find out that HUALIAN and Junwu just fought, kind of like Chang and Wei Wuxian back in Modazushi, and you're like, oh, well, it's fine. But now you find out it was this big epic battle and HUALIAN went all out, and you're like, wait, MXTX, you didn't show us that? Are you kidding? So I would like to think that maybe if we ever get this animated in the Donghua, or we ever get this in the manhwa, that it would show you all of the swords, or at least give us previews of it so that we don't feel completely cheated out of seeing it happen. I would like that. I would hope that that's what happened, but I don't know. But it was just, oh my god. And HUALIAN had used everything, and he found this crack in the armor, and then Hua Chong's saber was strong enough to actually pierce it. One thing that I also love throughout this is that the Goshi was constantly saying that Junwu was going to get beyond what was happening. There's this really cool parallel here between HUALIAN and Hua Chong's faith and then in each other, and then the same thing with Goshi for Junwu. Because, yeah, Goshi kept saying, like, oh, you guys aren't going to be able to hurt Junwu. He's going to get out of it. Junwu's going to do this. Like, the Goshi had so much faith in Junwu that he was going to be fine. But the funny thing about it is you have Hua Chong and HUALIAN who had faith in each other, and they believed that each other were stronger, and Hua Chong was like, no, HUALIAN, you are stronger than the Emperor. He's just trying to feed you with this lie to make you think that you're not, but you are. And then the funny thing is that HUALIAN believed that Hua Chong was going to be able to handle it all and be good. But the thing that's so funny is that you have Hua Chong and HUALIAN back and forth, and then with Junwu, he did not believe in the Goshi. So it was kind of just a one-way support system in that sense. So I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, Ruyi getting ripped. I actually, like, so much happened in this chapter set, I forgot he got ripped. And then when Mu Qing's like, oh, I'll sew you back up, I was like, oh god, I forgot about that. Also, Ruyi getting ripped, like major red carpet, major magic carpet from Aladdin vibes. I think of the carpet unraveling in Aladdin, and I think of Ruyi getting ripped by Junwu and tossed aside. I'm like, no! It was so sad. And then, yes, Junwu just saying, like, even I liked this idea too that we had the Goshi bring up, where Junwu was like, I could get pierced over and over again and it wouldn't bother me. That Junwu, he was just apathetic and did not feel pain. He had become so numb to everything happening to him, he just didn't feel anymore. He wasn't able to feel emotions anymore, right? Meanwhile, HUALIAN is not like him, and he is very much still able to feel emotion and pain. And that was a big difference too, which, as Hua Chong would tell us, has always been the case. Oh my god. And then for Junwu to say the only time he's ever been injured in how many hundreds of years has been from HUALIAN and Hua Chong is pretty crazy. But I have loved the battle with Junwoo versus Hua Chong and Xilian. I think it's been my favorite battle in the whole series because it's just finally seeing these really powerful characters face each other, and to see Hua Chong staying like in his cool but looking so savage. Like, I just want to see it. I want to see it illustrated. I want to see it animated. It's just really, really good. So yeah. And then the whole thing about Xilian getting his head smashed against the wall and him saying over and over again, "Does it hurt?" That all goes back to the mountain, to that night at the temple where Xilian was like, "It hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts," when Bai Wushang was stabbing him over and over again. Like, it all goes back to that, and him asking that question again, and Xilian begging Hua Chong not to come over there, that he was going to be able to handle it. It's like, oh my God. Like, all the callbacks to that were insane, right? And then Hua Chong cradling him. When Hua Chong cradled him, he was just like, no. He's like, I'm going to protect you. I'm not going to let him hurt you anymore. And I think Goshi was like trying to keep him from killing Xilian. And then Junwoo was like, he's like, really? He's like, this guy. He's like, why? He's like, you're just telling me that I'm being immature, not him. Junwoo went off the rails. He went off the deep end. And there were some moments with Junwoo's character where he was just like seeing that veneer crack and seeing like all of this just unsettling hatred and insecurity and anger and sadness underneath all of that. It was chilling to see Junwoo being like that even towards the end, right? And the Goshi was just trying to make amends and it not working. Oh my God. And then like this whole time that the Goshi and Junwoo were yelling at one another, I was like, can you guys just stop and go make out somewhere? I was like, seriously. I was like, if Junwoo and Goshi could just go make out like Xilian and Hua Chong have, we would probably be fine. This would probably all be settled. Everything would be great. But no, we can't have that. Oh my God. Driving each other mad. And then, what I loved was Mu Qing and Feng Xin and Hua Chong all attacking like Junwoo together. Like, Junwoo was hurting their best friend and their lover, and they were like having none of it, and they were like, no more, you leave Xilian alone. I love the idea of Mu Qing like getting him in the shoulder. And it is kind of sad, right? It is sad that Junwoo kept getting attacked and stabbed and hurt over and over again. That part is sad. But he was hurting Xilian and bashing his head against the stone wall, so of course his friends were to come to his aid. And that's what makes it so tragic, is that Junwoo never had the support system from his friends that he thought he did, like Xilian has. And it's just like, oh my God. But yeah, Feng Xin, Mu Qing attacking him, and then, oh my God, Hua Chong cutting off his hand and throwing it back to him, take back your filthy hand. Oh my God, it was amazing. And then they keep looking for, they kept looking for Zushin, who had been chucked away. We'll get to that point. But yeah, oh my God. I love that there's this big dramatic moment where it's just like the doom and gloom scenario, because you just don't know, right? You have Mu Qing that's like got the curse shackle that's trying to like take his life just like it did in you. You have Feng Xin like over the bridge, like with the arrows through him, and then like the fetus spirit is like gnawing on his head. You have Goshi who doesn't know what to do, and then you have Junwoo like slowly stalking towards Xilian, who's like bloody in Hua Chong's arms. And oh my God, the moment that Hua Chong is like, no, you can win, Your Highness. You're stronger than him. You're more powerful than him. And I love that it's this idea that the curse shackles that Junwoo had Xilian place on himself and placed on him were to hold him back so that he couldn't defeat Junwoo. And the message that there are millions of followers of Junwoo, and Hua Chong's like, they're all trash. There's just millions of just trash heaps. Whatever, my Gege collects junk. He knows about that, but there's one person who believes in him, and that's enough. That idea of there being one being enough, and him giving all the spiritual power to Xilian, and enough to break the curse shackles. It's not how I thought he would get the curse shackles off eventually, but I did not think it was going to be from true love's kiss, damn it. I didn't think it was going to be that. And I was like, oh my God. And then yes, and it gets, and then it should have made sense that Hua Chong, again, he used all his power the first time to like help Xilian to get rid of all the people in the temple when Xilian was stabbed. He used it all the second time to get rid of the human face disease, and the third time he did it to get rid of Junwoo to free Xilian from his shackles. Oh my god. Just, Hwa-Chang has ruined all men for women. Like, all men, they're not going to be enough. They're not going to be able to match up to him. No. And then he just burst him free. And then Zushin was sent flying. The whole debacle about damn Fengshen and Mu Qing trying to swing with the Goshi holding them to get that damn sword. I was like, we could have done with less of that. That was a big old mess. That was a big old mess to read. I was having trouble reading it because I was like, can we just, I felt like Monty Python Holy Grail. I was like, get on with it. Like, let's just get the sword back and give it to him, damn it. Meanwhile, Xilian and Junwoo are like fist fighting and punching each other. And it's just like, what the hell? It was insane. And the bridge is cracking. It was a lot. But for some reason, and I love the functions, can we just get this over and done with? For some reason, So-So comes and saves him and helps him for reasons. That part was so weird because he's never helped Fengshen before. And so I don't really know why it tried to help him in that moment. It seemed almost out of character for So-So to do so. It just seems so weird for the fetus spirit to just suddenly help him in that moment. I don't know, unless Fengshen was just like, in that moment, Fengshen was just being, just being beyond himself. Like, he wasn't being proud or anything. He was just trying to like hurry up and help something. And maybe that's why he helped them. I don't know. But I do love that Fengshen, actually called his son by his name. And for a moment, when you see the fetus spirit go back to him, he's like bouncing on his shoulders. Fengshen's like, I thought he was going to stay with him, but Xianlan doesn't want to. And that's so sad. We'll talk about it when we get to that part of the chapter and we get to get all this out there. But yeah, Xilian's cursed shackle. Bye. True love's first kiss. Took it off there, so that's fun. And then the cursed shackle this is still a question. We're going to keep that on there. But Mu Qing and his cursed shackle, done. Don't need to worry about it. It got broken. We're good there. Yay, rah. Huzzah. We'll go back to all of this. But yeah. And so they managed to take they managed to get the sword back. And the white armor was finally shattered. I love, oh my god, the idea that Xilian did the chest move, the breaking boulders, and that's what he called it, and he named it after the guy that stood up for him and believed in him. There's so much symbolism behind that one line, and Junwoo kind of gets it at the end. He's like, because he was by Wusheng, so he knows what was happening, right? But just the symbolism that one person believed in Xilian, and that was enough to keep him going. And that one person died for him, but he ended up using that one move. It was the one move that Junwoo didn't know about, because how could he know Xilian hadn't done it except when he was off, smashing boulders as a beggar back when Junwoo wasn't keeping tabs on him. That one move saved him. Like, just, oh my god, all the symbolism and it all wrapping around. It was brilliant. I loved it. Also, Junwoo telling them to get lost. You're like, is he talking to the faces on his face, telling them to get lost? Was he talking to Goshi and the others? Like, just that madness and the chaos. It was really something else. And then the Goshi saying, Your Highness, let it go. Let it go. And Junwoo saying, get away from me. There's no meaning in continuing the fight. Oh, like he was trying to write words on the blade like a spell, and the Goshi's like, you need to stop it. But man, Xilian just nailing him to the wall with the blade, that just happened. Like, my brain reading it had to catch up. I was like, wait, what happened? And then he just killed him. Just like, had to be done. Wild, right? And then for Junwoo to still, it was so interesting at this point in the story, because we've always seen Junwoo be so calm and collected as the Heavenly Emperor, and we've seen him be so like maniacal and sinister as by Wusheng, and we've never really seen him as being the prince. And the only time we kind of get the glimpse of him as the prince is when he first got the faces on him and was slowly getting madder and madder and getting madder at Mei Nianqing. And it seemed like at the very end, when Junwoo was telling him to get away and scram, it seemed like the Bai Wusheng and him had left. This veneer of Junwoo had left, and now it was just the crown prince that was left dying, and the Goshi was with him. And that's what it seemed to be at the end of it all, that was what was left over. And oh my God. And then I'm glad that the Goshi got to finally like explain that he's like, I wasn't trying to make Shilian someone to battle you. I wasn't trying to make Shilian into somebody to stand you up. I was just teaching Shilian and trying to teach him, you know, and I learned from my mistakes in the past. I was trying to teach him better than I had you, but he's his own person. You all went on different paths. It's natural. I've said this to you before and you didn't want to believe me, but what about now? And it's like, oh. And then for the Goshi say, I just really miss you. And I just miss the days that we had in our past before we ascended. Like that calling back to Yin Yu and Chon Yijin. Oh, that was heartbreaking. And it was so sad. And I felt like The Help. Like if you've ever watched the movie The Help, whenever the Goshi says, aren't you tired? Like I feel like he was channeling, oh my God, not Octavia Spencer, but oh my gosh, her name. I can't think of her name right now. She's an actress. She's amazing, but she plays the main woman in The Help when she's like, Miss Hilly, ain't you tired? It's like, that's all I could think of was The Help. I was like, oh, that sounds exactly like the Goshi being like, Junwoo, ain't you tired? Just want to let it go. Oh, it was so beautiful, like just so haunting. And that line that Shilian says, like his face like started to contour and he starts to get like the dark lines under his eyes like he's dying, and for him to look sickly and pale and on the verge of death, it's the first time he looked like human, like alive. Like he wasn't just this pristine plaster. It's like, oh. And Goshi saying, Your Highness, you've lost, and now free yourself. And then he says, have I been defeated? And I like that his last word was beautiful. Saying, what was that move? What'd you call it? And Shilian's like shattering boulders on the chest. And then beautiful. Man! I did not know how the end of Junwoo would go, but that was not how I predicted it. But I loved it. I love the callback to that move, all that it represents. It was wonderful. And then I thought, okay, well, we defeated Junwoo. Now we just got to get out of the mountain before it collapses or whatever. We're all fine. Everything's great. And then all of a sudden, you know, Shili, the curse shackle on Mooching's wrist had broken. Everything seemed okay. And then Hwa-Chong started to like evaporate. And I was like, no, stop. What are you doing, MXTX? Stop this. We can't have this. Why? Oh, it was so tragic. And I wanted to cry. I was like, no. And then that's when Shilian, I love that he's like, I wanted to tell you this long ago. And he's like, were you afraid that I'd find out that you almost became the white cloth calamity? And then, oh, thank God. I was like, MXTX, if you had gone on without them knowing any longer, I was going to freak out. But I was like, no, they finally figured it out. Everything got connected. All of the past, all the confession rang out. I was like, thank you. And then when he started to disappear, Shilian's like, wait, I still have lots more to tell you. You can't leave. You can't die. I want to tell you more things. I was just like, and I kept waiting for the red strand and the ring to get brought up. And it didn't until the very end. And then for Shilian to say he was going to go crazy if Shilian was gone. For Shilian to finally admit that his love is as bountiful as the sea for Hwa-Chong, that he loves him, that he wants him to stay by him, that he gets it. He's like, what do I do? And Hwa-Chong being like, Your Highness, I've always watched you. And he's like, but what should I do now? And then that's when Hwa-Chong is like, look, I have a beloved who's still in this world. And he lets Shilian connect all the dots of who he is, the ball of ghost fire, everything. And Shilian's like, well, you can't, he's like, you can't just go. He's like, we just did all of this. He's like, what are you talking about? And I loved this whole speech that he gave him where he's like, I've protected you. And he's like, I understand your everything, your courage, your despair, your kindness, your pain, your resentment, your hate, your intelligence, your foolishness. He's like, I would have you use me as a stepping stone, but I know you wouldn't allow it. He's like, I would have you use me as the bridge you take apart after crossing, the corpse bones you need to trample to climb up, the sinner who deserved the butchering of a million knives, but you wouldn't let that happen. I'm like, this whole speech is so beautiful. And he's like, I don't ever want to rest in peace. I was like, when HUALIAN's like, because when he said, you won't be able to rest in peace like this, and HUACHANG was like, I pray to never rest in peace. And that's when we realized he's a ghost fire. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, well, he can't die because he doesn't want to rest in peace. So how can he leave? Like, no. But the whole point was, this was exactly like the other times where he's vanished and gone away, but he's always come back. It's just in the past, HUALIAN didn't realize it was HUACHANG that was fading away and had dissipated. So he didn't really he was like, oh, well, that Wuming is gone, or that ghost fire is gone. But he didn't have the love and attachment that he does now to them as he does with HUACHANG. So for the first time, HUALIAN is seeing him dissipate again. And he's like, no, you have to come back. And he does, right? It's like HUALIAN's third ascension is HUACHANG's, third time coming back. I kept thinking he would ascend in this chapter, that this would be another calamity would come down and strike and let him ascend again. But I guess him coming back is the equivalent of that, so I can't complain. And then when he said to die in battle for you is my greatest honor, I was like, no, because that's basically what he did here, was to die against Junwoo in battle. And HUALIAN's like, and when HUALIAN was like, you said you'd never leave me, and HUACHANG starts talking about banquets ending, and I was like, look, you can't be doing that. No. We did not come this far for you to leave forever. But I seriously thought for a second it was going to happen. And he says, but I'll never leave you. I'll come back if you believe in me. Because that's what he was asking last set of chapters. He was like, I just need you to believe in me, right? And then he becomes all the butterflies. And at that point, I was like, oh, well, there's no way that we're stopping with these chapters. No way. Nope, got to read the next section. Absolutely not. And then, of course, I love that Feng Xin and Muqing are like, well, what can we do? Is there anything we can do? I love that they want to help HUALIAN get HUACHANG back. Like, that's so sweet. I love that. And then MXTX has the audacity to have it fade into a time skip. How dare her? I was like, no! I can't imagine those of you that read this chapter and were like, wait a minute! Wait a minute! Can't imagine. I cannot imagine. No. Like, there was so much tension in these chapters, and I was like, ah! So we cut back to the present, where they're all camping out on Mount Taisang while they're figuring out what they can do. They're trying to get their checks and balances in order before they build a new heavenly capital, and trying to figure out how in the world they're going to do that, right? And I love that what Muqing is like, okay, look, Pei Ming, here's your problem. You take away 8,880,000 merits, so it's 8,880,000 merits. So you take that away and add 6 million. Oh my God. And add 6,660,000. Oh, 6,660,000 merits. Oh my God. That seems like a lot more. And then, was that billions or millions? Weird. And then we have 1,700 million. Oh my God. And 200,000 merits. Oh my God. That's insane. What are we doing? Minus. None of this math means anything. It doesn't add up. What does the book say? The book gives me numbers. I'm bad at math. So what does this book say? What does it give us for Muqing? I'm going to find that spot in here where it says that. It says, okay, so you had 8,880,000, and then you add 6,660,000 plus another 17,200,000. Okay, and then they're like, we can't figure this out. What do we do? So they're all trying to figure out what the problem is, and they can't find Ling Wen, so that's a problem. None of them are good at accounting. This is all just a hot mess. And that's when I like that Muqing is more of himself now, out in the open. He's like being more sarcastic. He's not having to put on airs anymore. He can be himself more. I like that. I like Muqing isn't trying to hide anything or be stuck up, you know, or being like trying to be fake. I love that about Muqing. He gets to be himself. And that's when the Rainmaster comes. And I love that Pei Ming's in a sling. He's like, I'll go handle this. Again, he is Ken from the Barbie movie. There is no escaping it for me now. But then, yeah, then they hit that Xi Lian's there. And I was like, okay, we can't stop there. We have to keep going. We have to keep going with this and see what happens. So we get a lot of things addressed. The Rainmaster comes. I like that poor Banyu and Pei Su have been like just hanging out in the dungeon watching over all these ghosts. Although my headcanon is that Pei Su and Banyu have been doing really cute little romantic things with each other while they've been hanging out in the dungeons. Possibly like Pei Su gets like a little peck on the cheek to Banyu and Kamo's like, what are you doing? I think that would be adorable. I would love that. That would be great. And so then the Rainmaster, I love that the Rainmaster brings them all crops and they can restore their spiritual power. And the Rainmaster's like, here you go. And it's like, here's all these radishes that will restore your energy. Yay. But she brings back silk to like help repair Rui. I think that's so cute. And I love that Muqing is just like, I like functions like, Muqing, get to work, fix this. And Muqing's like, well, how dare you gonna make me sweep next? I like that it's now a joke. That's something that had all of this, like, all of these connotations of pain and trauma they can now kind of joke about because they're all such friends again. That like warmed my heart. That made me feel so happy. I was so in love with that. And so then he ends up, I like that Xi Lian's like, you know what? I can sew myself. It's fine. And Muqing's like, never mind. I'll do it. Love that. And so I like the Lord Rainmaster's like, has General Pei not recovered? So they established here that he made an agreement with Rong Guang to use the sword. And other than his apology, he was going to pay his arm as the price. So that's insane. Pei Ming was going to give up his arm in exchange for Rong Guang helping him. That's crazy, right? And so in the end, Rong Guang had dispersed his resentment and he didn't ask for the arm, which kept him injured, but it didn't like totally take it away. So I was like, that's crazy. Like, who knew? And then I love the Rainmaster's like, well, that must be why Pei Ming's in a weird funk. And Xi Lian's like, that is not the reason. I love how they describe him in the book. They're like, Pei Ming, a big man, a strong man, who thought himself teetering on dominating the heaven and earth. He couldn't stand losing face in front of a woman, much less one he had past grievances with. And so that's when Xi Lian goes with the Rainmaster to go visit Shanji, and we find out that she's dissipated. That's really sad, because like I had kind of wanted her and Kamo to become a thing, but I guess her unfinished business was finally settled with Pei Ming, and she just kind of passed on. I do love that the Rainmaster stays and like performs a service for her, and the callback to her being the last of Julie, the last of her own people. It kind of reminds me of like Xi Lian and Qi Rong. You have the Rainmaster and Shanji were the last of Julie, and you have Xi Lian and Qi Rong that were the last of Shanla, and they kind of like both of Shanji and Qi Rong kind of have disappeared. Although I'm still holding out hope for Qi Rong, little bit of hope, holding out just a bare bit. Talk about that in a second, but I like that she performed that service to let Shanji pass, and I'm glad Shanji finally passed, and that was it. But also, it's the idea of believing in people, right? So this idea of believing in others, you had it like expressed multiple times. Like you had Shanji, who finally accepted that Pei Ming did not love her and moved on. So you have that. Then we're going to talk about Zhan Lan and the idea that she moved on from Feng Shen. We'll talk about that. I'm really kind of sad about that. But MXTX likes to leave her protagonists together at the end, but everybody else is fair game for trauma and angst and unhappy endings. Like, everybody else is fair game, so there's that. And then, of course, you have Xi Lian, who has faith that Hua Chong will return. I love that Xi Lian's like, no, he told me he would. He'll keep his word. I know that we're going to go on forever and it's going to be fine. We're going to be the couple that's different. And they are. So yeah, And so then that's when he talks to Jean Lon. And I really love that. I love that Shilian, like, she kind of like starts talking to Shilian, Jean Lon does, and she kind of sits down like she's just tired and wants to talk to him. And I love that he kind of like sits down beside her and they have this little chat. Like, it was such a really nicely written part in this. But I like that Shilian finds her. At first, when we saw something moving, for a hot second I was like, is it Hua Chong? But then I was like, why would Hua Chong be moving fast, right? You know they're gonna make this romantic gesture that's larger than life, and then it is. So, but I like that they finally, established that So has this grudge upon him and he needs to be restrained and he's undergoing purification. Your cultivation's not as high, so it's hard to guarantee. So I'm gonna assist. It's like there is a little hope there, maybe, with Function and Jean Lon. If she can get him like purified a little bit and under control, maybe there's a chance, but I don't know. I don't think that's gonna happen. Because she kind of decides to leave. And I like that Shilian's like, do you not love him at all anymore? And to her, she's like, this isn't love. She's like, I don't want him to be forced to stay with us. And Shilian, what I love about it is that he's very convinced that Function still loves her. And I like the discussion where they talk about that he'd gather up all that money back then during the flashback and he'd buy her for a night, but then they just sit up and talk. And Shilian's like, well, that's how you know that a man really loves you. And that, I think, is so, to Shilian, that's so emblematic, because for Shilian, it's not necessarily like having sex with someone that proves that they love you. It's kind of like looking at it the opposite of Pei Ming. Like, for Pei Ming, he's like, love him and leave him. But as we see in this story, having sex does not equal love. Like, I think that that's very clear to make note of. But instead, it's other things. It's like other gestures. It's the idea that he would spend all this money and just stay up with her and talk to her. That's a sign of love. It's the idea of what Hua Chong and Shilian have done for each other. It's a sign of love. It's, all these little things that prove your love for someone, not that you just had intimate relations with them. And I love that. And Shilian's like, you know what kind of person Feng Shen is. And at first, when Jean Lon says that Shilian doesn't know anything about what it's like as the crown prince, there's a part of me that wanted to argue with her and say, well, Shilian's been through some messed up stuff. But then there's another part of me that's like, well, Shilian's not been through the same messed up stuff as her. She's had a different experience that's been messed up. And it is one that Shilian would not have experience with or understand. But I like her pointing out that he's ascended and has all this stuff. We've turned to ghosts. What am I doing seeking him out? And I wanted Shilian to be like, well, I'm waiting for a ghost to come back to me. Why can't Feng Shen? So I kept waiting for Shilian to say something like that, but he doesn't. And she's like, well, I kicked him away. And she's like, so why do I want to keep going back to him? And it's so sad. I like the Phoenix Spirit's just like licking her with its tongue like a dog. And she's just like, what do I do with this? And she's like, having So-So's enough for me, who hasn't made promises when they were young. And she says forever is impossible. And she's like, it's best to let it go. But Shilian's like, no, I believe in the person that can achieve forever. But she took him and left. I guess the good thing about it is it's sad in a way. I really wanted Feng Shen to reconnect with her and be with her. And maybe we still have quite a bit of this novel left. Maybe that will happen. But knowing MXTX has to give us at least one kind of angsty ending. And Junwoo and Mei Nianqing and Feng Shen and Jean Lon might be the one. I don't know. But the only good thing I do think about it is that she does say that Feng Shen is a good man. It's just been too long and everything's changed. And I wish that she'd give him another shot because I think he would try with her. But what I do appreciate is that he doesn't seem hung up on her. He seems like he's doing okay. Like, he finds Ling Wen, and like the next moment we see him with Ling Wen, like being all happy that he found her. He's not really thinking of Jean Lon. So maybe it is better that she leaves. If she's not going to be committed to it and she doesn't think it's going to work out, then it's probably not going to work out if she's not going to have faith in it. So maybe it's better she leaves with So-So, but that's really sad. We also didn't find out like how he came to be. So we're going to wait on that. We're going to keep that up on the board. I'm going to probably keep any of the unanswered questions up until we get to the extras and the edits and the revisions and talk about those. So don't answer my questions yet if they're still up there, but so yeah. And then Lan Chanshu. Lan Chanshu saying he gathered some soul particles of the green ghost and kept them in a lamp, and Goozy has it and is gonna grow bigger. I'm like, wait a minute. So what? I was like, that gives me a little bit of hope maybe for Chi-Rong that he can come back if he's got the soul particles. Some of his ashes are still there. If Goozy has faith, maybe he will come back. If Goozy's like Shi-Lien, maybe Chi-Rong will come back one day. We'll just have to see, right? Maybe. I really want Chi-Rong to come back at some point. I mean, obviously, Shi-Lien has all of his spiritual powers left. Chi-Rong is not going to do anything to harm anything. He'll just be... I want him to come back and be the cook for Shi-Lien and Hua-Chong in their shrine. And be there for Goozy. But I also think it'd be kind of neat if Lan Chanshu... we're going to mark him off here because we now know he's with Goozy. I would like it if Lan Chanshu kind of would teach Goozy maybe, and kind of like how Shi-Lien took on Lan Chanshu as a disciple. If Lan Chanshu took over Goozy as a disciple and raised him, I think that would be really cute. And then he could kind of like, you know, keep the little green lantern there and be like as a constant reminder to Lan Chanshu that Chi-Rong, who was utter trash and did all these bad things, in the end saved Goozy and did it over his own personal gains. And I do like that Shi-Lien notes how interesting it is that Lan Chanshu is doing something like this for Chi-Rong and being like, if that's how you guys base your ship off of that, I'm like, I'm fine with that. That all makes sense. Do what you gotta do. But I thought that was interesting. I was like, okay, all right. And then the Crimson Pearl. So now he gives back the Crimson Pearl. Lan Chanshu does to Shi-Lien. That was Long Ying's all that time. Now Shi-Lien is a pearl. Hua-Chong is a pearl. They both have a pearl. It's a matching set. Done. Great. We're all good. Love it. He's like, the person who helped him was a good man. And Lan Chanshu figured out. He figured out it was Shi-Lien. And then Shi-Lien's like, I'm giving it back to you then. So then, oh my God, chapter 243 being called How My Lord Aches for the Flower. How I Ache for My Lord. What a chapter title. Are you freaking kidding me? Oh my God. So they capture Ling Wen. Ling Wen's back. I think that Ling Wen's punishment is hilarious. I think that Ling Wen, for betraying the heavenly officials, for going against everything, their punishment is to do the exact same day job they were doing before. And the sad thing is that Ling Wen finally gets the recognition they deserve. Everyone praises her now, but her punishment is she has to go back to doing what she was doing. Hilarious. I'm glad that the heavenly officials were not malicious towards her. They genuinely wanted her to be there, but she was like, I just want to go on vacation again. Why can't I do this? No. It's like she gets promoted back to what she was doing, and she was like, no, I want to go on holiday. Hilarious. And so the Brocade Immortal, I thought this was genius. So we find out about the Brocade Immortal. I thought it was genius that we figure out that Shi-Lien took off the robes. What I was wondering was, I was like, during the battle, I was like, where was Ling Wen? Because at the end of chapter 241, when they were like, where's Ling Wen? I'm like, well, where was Ling Wen? And I was like, wasn't she a Daruma doll? Where did the Daruma doll go? And so it makes sense when Hua-Chong dispersed into the butterflies and dissipated, then his abilities would no longer have effect. So the Daruma doll of Ling Wen would become Ling Wen and she'd run off. And Shi-Lien had on the Brocade Immortal, so it makes sense that he took it off. I love that the Ghost City is his friends, and that all the Ghost City residents are just Shi-Lien's buddies, and he's like, hey, can you help a man out? Love it. Love it. It's the most adorable thing. It's precious. I'm in love with it. It's great. And then Ling Wen took the bait. And then this conversation between Ling Wen and Shi-Lien, it all comes full circle. Like the very first person in the Heavenly Court that Shi-Lien talked to was Ling Wen. Way back in volume 1. She was the first person he talked to. And then in this scene, other than Mu Qing and Feng Shen that we hear about later, other than them, she's the last like other heavenly official that he talks to. And I love that she like tells him about the Brocade Immortal. And so that question, why didn't the Brocade Immortal work on Hua Chong and Shi Lian? It's because they didn't want to hurt each other. So of course it wouldn't work. It's like its powers were negated. I love that. And so I love that this conversation they have, and Ling Wen's like, I did kill Bai Jing to speed up the destruction of Zhuli. That's not wrong. But, you know, this robe has made its way around the mortal realm and it's transformed. And then she talks about how, you know, Shi Lian and Hua Chong love each other, and she figured that out. And I love that Shi Lian kind of calls her out, where he's like, so you were really just taking the Brocade Immortal to Mount Tonglu to make him a supreme, and you guys can make up, right? And I love that she doesn't want to like say anything. She doesn't want to like give anything back, and she's like, I don't know. Doesn't matter. Let it be. She gets so cold there at the end. I was like, Ling Wen, what a badass. She like, till the very end, was like, given none back, right? So then she talks about the ring. She's like, yeah, that ring around your neck. It's like the very unique ghosts who gift their lover their ashes. So I like the fact that Shi Lian has been wondering. He's been kind of like thinking it was the ashes from the beginning, but he didn't want to say anything because, you know, once you say it out loud, it's like, so the ring was the ashes. And so I'm like, the ring was forged from the ashes and made from it. And she's like, usually when love blinds your reason, you give objects tied to your life to someone else and can have horrifying consequences. Something like a genuine heart is made to be trampled. The keepsake, some were stolen, some were scattered. Nothing ended well, but you are the exception. And that's why Shi Lian's like, so General Bai was like this. And that's kind of him becoming a device is kind of the same thing, right? I love Ling Wen saying, don't say it like I would do anything for him. After all, I'm cold-blooded and I recognize no loved ones. So why would I do anything like that? And he's like, is that right? I love it. I kind of love like the kind of asexual vibes that Ling Wen gives off here, but Shi Lian's kind of calling her bluff, being like, yeah, you say you're not doing anything, but you do it for him, right? For Bai Jing. Love it. Love it. That's just such a good conversation. That whole thing was just wonderful. So basically we got the ring explained. It is his ashes. We got it confirmed. We can finally take that sucker off of there. That's good. Makes me feel better knowing that that's the case. He still has the ashes there. And so then, yeah. So then Shi Lian, he like cleans up around the wrecked and broken cliffs at the Royal Holy Pavilion, and he put up a little cottage. And then he just cleaned up around all the forests where everything was burned. Like, hey, like he tries to make it how it was before. And Mu Qing comes and gives him Ruyi back. And I like that Mu Qing tries to like brush off that he's really proud of the job that he did. And Shi Lian kind of calls it out. And was like, this is really good. And he's like, oh, well, you know, I guess. And so then, I was really curious if since Hua Chong had left and all the heavenly officials then were trying to rebuild the capital, what's interesting is, and kind of frustrating at the same time, is that Shi Lian now has the most power out of anybody, thanks to Hua Chong helping him get his powers back. So he's kind of on par with Jun Wu now. But the funny thing is, Shi Lian doesn't want to rule. He doesn't want to be the Heavenly Emperor. He's never wanted that. So when Mu Qing was like, are you going to come back to the Heavenly Realm and like help us in the upper court and wait on Hua Chong there? He's like, no. He's like, when Hua Chong comes back, he's going to come here, the Ghost City, and I want to be around. Or he's going to be at like the Chandang Temple. I want to be there too. It's so beautiful because it's like Shi Lian definitely diverging from Jun Wu's path. And I love that. So the question is, what are they going to do in the upper court now that Jun Wu's gone? Is Mei Nianqing going to go up there and take over? Or are they all just going to kind of like, there's not going to be a Heavenly Emperor. It's just going to be like just a group of the Heavenly officials. Like, what's that going to be like, you know? Is Mei Nianqing going to come and take over and like take Jun Wu's place? I'm going to be very curious to see if we get an answer to that question. But I don't know. But I love Shi Lian said, no, I'm going to stay down here and wait for him. And I love it. He's like, do you really believe he'll come back? And he said, of course, as if it was the most logical thing in the world. And I loved this idea that Shi Lian, what made me so sad was that Shi Lian, he got used to being lonely but he always wanted somebody to come talk to him. And all these 800 years, he wanted somebody to seek him out. And it was finally San Long. What I was going to say is frustrating is that none of the other heavenly officials recognized Xilian until he had enough power to match Jun Wu. And then suddenly they were like, oh, hey, Xilian. And he's like, whatever. You guys are all fake. Whatnot. But it's so sad to hear him talk about how he had done all this stuff on his own, but he almost had wanted someone to come find him. And now that he had a taste of that with Hua Chong, he didn't want anybody else. He just wanted him back. It's like, and MXTX gives us that fantasy, right? Because when you do lose someone like that in the real world, they don't come back. And it's really, really hard, and it's really sad. And the stuff Xilian talks about is experienced by a lot of people, but that's what's so great about this book is that it is fantasy. It is a romance. It is a happy ending. Because unlike in reality, when we don't get that person back necessarily, we do in this. Like, Xilian gets Hua Chong back because he believes, and it's beautiful. I know a lot of people like realistic stories because they tie to our own world and everything, and they're like, oh, that ending wasn't realistic, and it wasn't how it would be in the real world. I'm like, yes, because it's fiction, damn it. You know, we have enough of that. I was like, I want to escape in this beautiful story where Xilian believes so hard and Hua Chong believes so hard that they come back for each other, and it's beautiful. So shut up and leave me alone. But yeah. And then we go back the months and months that he's going, and we see Feng Xin, and I like the when Master visits him and all of that. And then I love that Xilian was like, I can wait forever. He's like, Hua Chong waited for me for 800 years. I can wait that long. You know, it's only been a year, so what's 10,000 more? It reminded me of a Doctor Who episode where one of the characters ends up waiting on the other character for like 2,000 years or 20,000 years or however long it is. And it had a very reminiscent vibe to this. It's around the time of Matt Smith, the 10th Doctor. It's really, really good. But then, yeah. And then on one simple day, Xilian was picking up all the junk as usual. And he got a cart pulled by an ox. He saved up money and purchased it. And then as soon as you talk about going up the mountain and there was the Lantern Festival mentioned, I'm like, oh my God, this is not only like reminiscent of earlier when Hua Chong let all the blessing lanterns out for Xilian, but it also is reminiscent of the first time that they met on the cart under the maple trees. But then it's also reminiscent of the other Lantern Festival where Xilian met him, catching him from as he fell down. And I love that the word of disgrace in Chinese also talks about pining, and Xilian being like, he wasn't the only one who had fallen. Peace de resistance. Beautiful. And then, yeah. And then Hua Chong, like, letting out the last lantern waiting on him. And then running towards each other. Are you freaking kidding me? It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. He believed. They spent 800 years running towards each other, and this time it only took an instant to fall into each other's other embrace. Oh, y'all. Oh, my God. I'm so glad I read those other 2 chapters. This was the best winter celebratory gift to start the new year, so... I can't wait to hear your comments about this. I'm sure my mind is just mush from everything that's happened. I'm so overjoyed. I'm so happy. I'm so elated. But there's still half of this damn novel and more that we have left to go. And I'm excited about that. I feel like we have a lot of extras because I feel like after this, what more do we have to say? Other than we do have some questions that need answers, right? So we still have to talk about, Mu Qing, we've kind of settled his whole thing. We did find Chan Yizhen. I love Chan Yizhen looking like he looked like a little sticky rice ball with his hair stuck out, like leaves attached to him. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Looked like a bandaged mummy. We still don't know about Yin Yu, though. Yin Yu and the Cursed Shackle. We're gonna keep that up here. Oh, I spelled Curse Shackle wrong. I'm like so addled. So Yin Yu and the Curse Shackle, we're gonna keep that up there because we're not quite sure. I do want to answer that damn puppet. Maybe we're going to find out. Maybe in one of the extras or something, Huachong will tell HUALIAN or something like that. Maybe that'll happen to come yet. The 500 years in Third Ascension, we'll just keep it up there for now. The Fetus Spirit Origin, we'll keep it up there. Heshon, and are we going to see Heshon again? Are we going to get more of him not being able to pay his debts? I hope we do, but honestly, if that was the last time earlier that him and the Windmaster saw each other, I don't know. The Thundermaster, are we ever going to find anything else about him out? I don't know. We'll keep him up here for now. That would be fun. Just for now. Thundermaster, keep them up here. Whatever's going to happen to Mei Neon Ching, I kind of want to know more about his character. Oh my gosh. Mei Neon Ching, I want to know about him. If he's going to end up doing anything other than staying with the corpse of Junwoo and Mount Tonglu. And then finally, Qirong. Is Qirong going to come back? I kind of want to know. That's my only other question is he coming back? So yeah, we've narrowed down our things to the very end of this. We checked off a lot of stuff. This chapter set, oh my god. I'm going to rewrite all this. Make it look nicer. But, okay. This was an emotional set of chapters, and I absolutely loved it. I'm ready for what else is going to happen in this novel, but now it's just a celebration. Now we're just going to celebrate the rest of Heaven Official's blessing, along with the rest of the Donghua, the rest of the audio dramas, before we dive into Scum Villain. We're going to enjoy this and have a good old damn time with it. So next week, since I've read this chapter set, next week is going to be just, I had down chapters 244 and 245. We'll see about that. We'll see about that and go from there. I may have to reorganize some of these chapters since I took a big old chunk out of this. So I don't know. We'll see. I may have to do some reorganizing. I'll probably talk with the Discord about that as I get that prepared. So in any case, we're definitely going to look at chapters 244 and 245 next week. I may reorganize some things, so we'll just have to wait on that and see. But y'all, this was amazing. I can't wait to hear your comments down below. I am going to wait a little bit to get some comments, at least from the next chapter set, and then go from there. But in any case, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more of Heaven Official's Blessing. Bye!